Chapter 879 Slashing the Eye of Heavenly Tao Again. Chapter 879 Slashing the Eye of Heavenly Tao Again. Shua. Ling Han swung the axe in a slashing movement, and the space immediately shattered into fragments like crystal shards. The destructive power of this axe was terrifying. It directly smashed the void. On the other side, the heaven and earth of the immortal realm had already appeared. Wang, the Eye of Heavenly Tao, emerged. Its mission was to stop all those who destroyed the balance between heaven and earth. If it also had sentience, it would have to be extremely depressed. It had been beaten up twice, and the sky had been split twice. Was it an unlucky year? As Ling Han had caused great damage, it naturally couldn't wait any longer. The gigantic eye immediately shot open, launching a beam of prismatic light straight at Ling Han. Ling Han effortlessly blocked it and said, "If you stop me, then I will slash you. But if you pledge your allegiance to me and become an auspicious protector of the great Ling Empire, I can guarantee that you shall exist for all eternity." Responding to Ling Han were multiple divine chains of regulation, intending to coil around and trap him. Since you are stubborn, then I will just have to slaughter you. With a cold glare, Ling Han smashed out with the axe and a gash immediately appeared on the Eye of Heavenly Tao, all across from top to bottom and a meter deep. Blood immediately gushed out violently. The world suddenly descended into an all-consuming sadness. Everyone had the urge to cry. The wound of the Eye of Heavenly Tao burst wide open, and an endless stream of blood gushed out at Ling Han, completely drowning him. Paltry tricks. Ling Han casually swiped the axe. The blood stream was immediately slashed open by him, and like blood-red satin, flowed to either side of him. His gaze fearsome, he slashed once more with the axe. The wound on the Eye of Heavenly Tao expanded a little, almost splitting it into two halves. Too strong. Below, everyone cried out in surprise. They only knew that Ling Han was very strong and monstrous. This was clearly proven when he had slaughtered Ao Jian 1 year ago. However, only a few would know the greatness of Ao Jian's strength after all. On the contrary, the image of Ling Han that had been the most deeply rooted in the hearts of the people was his identity as a heaven-grade alchemist. But now, everyone knew that Ling Han was incomparably strong. Before, how great of an effort had Ma Duo Bao expended just to cut down the Eye of Heavenly Tao. Yet Ling Han had done it easily and appeared still full of energy. In the distance, the 7 kings nodded in unison. It had to be admitted that Ling Han had already surpassed their boss. It was no wonder that Ma Duo Bao held Ling Han in such high esteem, and even passed on the heavy responsibility of splitting open the sky to the latter in the end. Be sure to succeed, so as to console Boss Spirit in heaven. That's a given, otherwise how can we go behead those vile 5 sects and the Ao clan? That's right. If they didn't split open the sky, then they would only remain trapped within the lower realm. Even if they wouldn't be refined into the realm pill, they would eventually die of old age. Therefore, in order to avenge Ma Duo Bao, their only way was to split open the sky and ascend into the immortal realm. Only then would they be qualified to slaughter the 5 sects and the Ao clan. The Eye of Heavenly Tao was going mad, and more divine chains of regulation shot out from the eyeball, spreading into a great net. Also, the pointed edges of the chains were sharp beyond comparison, just waiting for an opportunity to pierce through Ling Han's body. In theory, the Eye of Heavenly Tao should be able to suppress Ling Han, as the latter had yet to comprehend the power of regulation. But Ling Han's power was indeed too strong, so strong that it could crush the power of regulation, which caused the Eye of Heavenly Tao to be helpless against him. What was more, Ling Han had yet to utilize his powerful physique. Otherwise, you may hit it, but could you penetrate the defense of my body that is on the level of godly metal? Using one hand, Ling Han suppressed the eye of heavenly Tao, while his other hand was brandishing the mountain and river axe to split open the sky. He clearly had to divide his attention and energy, yet the eye of heavenly Tao was sent flying with an effortless punch and slap, and with a casual swing of the axe he slashed a wide opening in the sky. The empty void emerged to the greatest extent. Everyone became dumbfounded as they watched. He was much stronger than Ma Duo Bao by a great leap. Splitting open the sky, there was hope for success. Everyone was getting more and more anxious. They had now pinned all hopes on Ling Han. Defeating the eye of heavenly Tao and even shattering the void was nothing. The biggest obstacle would come from the immortal realm. It was precisely due to this that Ma Duo Bao had died with resentment. What about Ling Han? Shwa, shwa, shwa. Ling Han kept on slashing with the axe, and the tear in space kept on getting bigger as well. On the opposite side, the indistinct silhouette of the immortal realm once again appeared before everyone. The eye of heavenly Tao was going crazy. It had already detected that the sky would be split open and it had ceased to exist. Of course, it desperately threw out more divine chains of regulation. The whole eye had turned black, and frightening qi began spreading. Ling Han's eyes flashed. How could there be demonic qi? One ought to know that this small world of theirs was inclined towards the immortal realm. It would only ascend into the immortal realm, and not the netherworld, once the sky had been split open. Yet, why were there signs that the eye of heavenly Tao was becoming demonic? Was it someone meddling from the netherworld? Then you won't be allowed to stay any more. Ling sneered coldly. He wielded the Revere Life sword on his left hand, and activating the 10,000 techniques returned to one, slashed out. The tip of the blade had been boosted with Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, and as the sword slashed, blazing white lighting was unleashed. Pooh! Lightning streaked across, and the eye of heavenly Tao was suddenly cut into two pieces right down the middle. The divine chains of regulation were swaying about in a disorderly state as large amounts of blood poured out, and it fell down from the sky. It burned rapidly as it fell, not leaving any trace of it in this world. Before reaching the ground, the eye of heavenly Tao had already been completely burned to ashes. Blood rained upon the whole world. Everyone was filled with a strong sense of sorrow. This was the grief of heaven and earth. But simultaneously, the majestic sound of a horn reverberated through heaven, and earth. This was appraising him to the hero. Ling Han put away the Revere Life sword and concentrated on swinging the axe. Shwa, shwa, shwa. As battle prowess of 23 stars of shattering void tears smashed madly, the sky of the immortal realm drew closer and closer. Shwa. At this moment, the strike from the tip of a 3,000-meter-long sword ray came from the immortal realm. No one was surprised by this. Had there been no response from the immortal realm, then that was the strangest thing. Ling Han raised his left hand and pressed it down on the sword ray. Pa had caught onto the blade's tip with his left hand that was imbued with a golden light and lightning. He had utilized 2 mystical powers to achieve this. In fact, he could have used his physique to take it head-on, but he did not want the 5 sects to know that he possessed this trump card up his sleeve. Perhaps the other side might have a more powerful trick, which would be capable of targeting his physique. Thus, it would be considered a secret weapon. With the battle prowess of 23 stars of shattering void tear to counter this move, Ling Han was forced to retreat over 36 meters in the end, and the action of the splitting open the sky was instantly slowed down. In the immortal realm, there emerged again that middle-aged man grasping a long sword. He bore a somber demeanor, but his facial expression was that of amazement. This had really shocked him. Only a short period of 1 year had passed, and another character of the lower realm who could split open the sky actually appeared. Incredible! What was happening with the lower realm? However, in any case, these insignificant beings had better not think that they would succeed in splitting open the sky. They had no idea of the disparity in strength between humans and the immortals. "Your Majesty!" "Sire!" Everyone shouted in shock. Finally, the most crucial moment has arrived. Ling Han chuckled lightly as he gestured with a middle finger towards the immortal realm and said, "Today I am splitting open the sky. How could it be possible that I have come unprepared? If your strength is only so, then what right do you have to prevent me from splitting open the sky?" Chapter 880, Substitution. Chapter 880, Substitution. For a monarch to actually give someone the middle finger might have seemed awfully vulgar, but everyone just wanted to vent their spite. They also wanted to say, "Fuck your mother!" Being treated as raw materials for refining into the realm pill, who wouldn't want to push the 5 sects of the immortal realm to the ground and step on them? His Majesty was too domineering. On the other side, in the immortal realm, although the middle-aged man wasn't able to hear Ling Han's words, he could clearly see the hand gesture that the latter had put out and could not help but express anger, his killing intent blazing. What a joke! He was an elite of the Sun-Moon tier, and what did 3 suns and 3 moons mean? The ultimate supreme. In the immortal realm, a tiny difference in tier level would mean an endless gap. What was the notion of his cultivation as a supreme ultimate of Sun-Moon tier? If one were to return Ling Han's strength to the body refining tier, then his would be of the spiritual infant tier. Furthermore, everyone conformed to the same standard of strength. No one could bypass the ranks in battle. There would be absolute suppression, so much so that there wasn't any basis to put them together for comparison to begin with. Yet now a puny cultivator of the shattering void tier actually dared to provoke him, which caused him to nearly explode in fury. He immediately slashed once with his sword, releasing a 3,000-meter sword ray, which, despite crossing the boundaries of 2 realms, still possessed great power enough to kill anyone with a power level of less than 20 stars of shattering void tier in this realm. The difference of a single star meant a world of difference. "Pa!" Ling Han gave a casual slap with his palm, and the sword ray was immediately shattered to pieces. He then stood proudly like a god. What? Everyone had mouthed this word silently, full of astonishment. It turned out that it wasn't Ling Han's full strength before. Fuck! This made everyone so emotionally stirred up that their scalps had gone numb, and they genuinely felt that there was hope of splitting open the sky, that it could really succeed. The beautiful women who had gotten acquainted with Ling Han, such as Qin Lianyu, Lin Xiangqin, and Wenrin Qianqian, were all feeling excited and also had a sense of loss at this moment. This man was just too amazing. In the beginning, they had all hoped to win him over, but now they could only look at his heroic and domineering figure from afar. If they were given another chance, they would recklessly push Ling Han down and be done with it, so it would then be too late to change anything. Hee, that brat's real strength can be more than that. Helian Tianyan said softly, "Only someone like him who often exchanged blows with Ling Han would know that the latter's ultimate battle prowess was 25 stars of the shattering void tier. The stronger the strength, the more difficult it was to improve the battle prowess by another star. The same power of the nation at Ling Han's hands when he was just at the first layer of the shattering void tier could increase his battle prowess by so much as 15 stars, but now he could get a boost of a pitiful 2 stars. But precisely for this reason, even if it was only a 1-star upgrade, it would give rise to a qualitative change as if he was completely reborn." Ling Han wagged his index finger towards the middle-aged man of the immortal realm, implying, "You are too inferior. This won't do." He then crooked his finger, which was, "If you have any more powerful moves, just use it. This young master is waiting." This angered the middle-aged man. They merely qualified to become their raw materials for refining an alchemical pill, and actually wanted to rebel now. Had Ling Han quietly stayed in the lower realm, when the immortals descended, they would also be suppressed by the realm powers, and not being able to defeat Ling Han would be normal. But now that he had taken the initiative to split open the sky, allowing the immortals to attack with full strength from the immortal realm. He could still act so arrogantly. The middle-aged man slashed his sword multiple times, and 300-meter-long sword rays shot towards Ling Han like a meteor shower. Being an ultimate supreme of the Sun-Moon tier, he could no longer stand being actually unable to kill a mere mortal. Ling Han used one hand to split open the sky, and the other to block incoming attacks. If limited to strength, his attack was unlikely to break through the barriers of the two realms and smash into the immortal realm, but to deflect the attacks coming from the immortal realm that had been weakened by the realm powers could be done effortlessly. In the immortal realm, the middle-aged man frowned and stopped attacking. He finally realized that he couldn't do anything to Ling Han. If he went on like this, he could only watch the other party succeed in splitting open the sky. He disappeared from the hole. Long live! Everyone was cheering. Could it be that the 5 sects of the immortal realm had given up? They laughed loudly. Finally, they wouldn't be refined into an alchemical pill. Ling Han dared not be careless, because who'd send the strongest elite out at first? In the eyes of the 5 sects of the immortal realm, even if he and Ma Duo Bao had the ability to split open the sky, they were only slightly bigger ants. Consequently, they would definitely not dispatch the strongest elite to attack. Sure enough, in just a few breaths of time, another person emerged from the immortal realm. He was an elderly man, full of white hair and white beard, with a sage-like disposition. On top of his head, there was an awe-inspiring sight of 4 suns and 4 moons, the perfection of Sun-Moon tier. However, it could be clearly seen that he had a sun and moon which was smaller than the other suns and moons. From this, it could be deduced that although this old man had reached perfection of the Sun-Moon tier, he had yet to reach his true peak of cultivation. Suddenly, the hearts of the people fell once again. Although most people wouldn't know the hierarchical division of levels and corresponding characteristics of the mortal beings, at the very least, they still had some basic understanding. Seeing that there had been substitution by another, the one who was here would definitely be stronger. Your Majesty, you must hold on. The white-haired old man naturally wouldn't say anything, and directly slashed out with his saber. Pooh! Saber ray crashed through the barrier of the realm towards Ling Han. Although most of its power had been consumed during this process, a 6,000-meter-long saber ray cut into this realm. The saber was filled with godly patterns, exuding might beyond the level of this realm. Mystical powers are really the techniques of the immortal realm. Ling Han nodded inwardly. He had sensed the presence of mystical powers from the attacks of the 2 immortals. He believed that mystical powers were the arts of the immortal realm, so whether this technique was strong or weak in the immortal realm, it would become a supreme mystical power as long as it was placed in the lower realm. He raised his hand, activated the earth overturning seal, and pressed it against the saber ray. Pung! Ling Han was suddenly made to retreat a few hundred meters with a slash. Sure enough, the disparity of levels at the immortal level was extremely wide. The other party was obviously a minor level higher than the previous one, but the power of this attack was completely incomparable. Ling Han believed that if these 2 people were to engage in a life-and-death battle, the middle-aged man wouldn't withstand one blow from the old man. He waved his hand. It was a bit numb, but it was just that. You want to slash me with my physique? You had better be able to unleash immortal-level strength first. The old man was also slightly surprised. In his opinion, one slash from his saber was enough to cut Ling Han into 2. What's happening here? The strength of this ant from the lower realm is somewhat stronger than expected. Below, everyone had a feeling of indescribable anxiety. They had just realized that the success of Ma Duo Bao in splitting open the sky had been far beyond reach the 5 sects of the immortal realm, simply hadn't dispatched their strongest elite for the attack back then. Of course, this would be unreasonable. Why would immortals come out to prevent the splitting open of the sky? Otherwise, who would be capable of splitting open the sky? What were they to do? Now that they had substituted the middle-aged man with a stronger person, could Ling Han withstand it? The old man on the opposite side was only slightly surprised for a moment. Immediately, there was a series of saber rays slashing towards this side. Every slash of the saber was a plain strike, without any special technique. It might be assumed that no technique could surpass the realm barriers and unleash its might on the other side. Ling Han finally activated the full power of the nation and raised his battle prowess to its limit. 25 stars. Pa! He grabbed the saber rays with his bare hands, and pa! The saber rays shattered to pieces with a smash, and even the godly patterns inscribed on them were useless. It was necessary to know that Ling Han had activated the Earth Overturning Seal. This was also a technique of the immortal realm. His martial intent was displayed ostentatiously, enough to counter the godly patterns. Below, there was a silence, and then there was a burst of earth-shattering cheers. Long live His Majesty! Almighty, Your Majesty! How domineering, Your Majesty! Everyone was hysterically screaming. It was only with such loud screams could they vent their repressed emotions. Impressive! They had really vented their frustrations. Chapter 881. Entering into the Immortal Realm. Chapter 881. Entering into the Immortal Realm. Ling Han continued to split open the sky. The mountain and river acts fell repetitively. The skies were torn apart and finally connected through to the Immortal Realm. Who? The spiritual chi instantly gushed in, as boundless as an ocean. Fuck! I'm about to break through. Helian Tianyan exclaimed in shock. He was the descendant of the true dragon, and his bloodline was too powerful. Others could not possibly break through to the immortal level without a suitable cultivation technique. But he was different. As long as he was in the environment of the immortal realm, it was as easy as drinking water for him to break through. But he hurriedly suppressed his breakthrough. He had not yet tempered his shattering void tear cultivation to the limit, and had no intention of breaking through so quickly. If it was the previous he who had yet to meet Ling Han, he would naturally think that battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tear was already the limit. So what else could he do if not break through? But after meeting a monster like Ling Han, he also seemed to be leaning towards becoming a monster himself. He decided to pound against the target strength of 20 stars of shattering void tear before he considered breaking through. In any case, he was still young, wasn't he? Furthermore, he would definitely be expelled by the lower realm if he broke through now. Yet there was still a sky-ceiling great formation above him. So if he was expelled, that would really be courting death. He naturally was not going to do that. Denser spiritual chi was not the only thing gushing in from the immortal realm. There was also a complete set of regulations, which made everyone feel as if they had caught hold of something. Some people directly sat down in a cross-legged position. They obtained an opportunity to break through. The sky had opened, but it was not yet completely successful, because presently the hole in the sky was still too small and would not allow the whole lower realm to pass through. However, attracted by the magnetic pull of the immortal realm, the lower realm was still drawing closer to the latter. It was like a pregnant woman, exerting force from both within and without just to give birth to an infant. On the other side, the old man finally had a dramatic change of expression. If this situation continued, then even if Ling Han did not make another move, the lower realm could still possibly pierce through directly due to the attraction from the immortal realm. He quickly left. After a short while, a purple-robed old woman appeared. She, too, had 4 suns and moons floating above her head. However, her 4 suns and moons were all the same size. This was the real perfected level of the sun-moon tier. She had cultivated to the peak, and if she did not break through to the heavenly body tier, there was no possibility for her to otherwise improve herself. The purple-robed old woman looked coldly at Ling Han. Hung, 2 phoenix wings 30,000 meters, long stretched out behind her back. Then she extended her right hand and endless fiery flames ignited. Even if the two realms were separated, the flames would still made one feel a boundless chill. These flames could burn everything to ash. Xiao, the old woman, flicked a finger, and a bullet of fire shot over. It was very plain. There was no thousands meters long sword ray or saber ray, but merely a fire bullet that was about the size of a fist. Yet the power behind this small fire bullet had exceeded the saber ray from before by at least 10 times. Indeed, even if they were on the same minor layer, the difference between the early period, middle period, late period, and peak period was incredibly colossal. No wonder those that could cross over a sublayer to battle an opponent on a stronger sublayer would deserve to be praised as prodigies. She should be the strongest elite of the 5 sects of the immortal realm. Then, Ling Han would only need to block this one blow, and he would have really succeeded, and could finally be afraid of nothing, right? Ling Han moved, concentrating all his power, and delivered a palm strike aimed at that bullet of flames. But it was of no use. Even his battle prowess of 25 stars of shattering void tear could not block this strike, and he was entirely swallowed up by the flames in an instant. "Your Majesty!" everyone exclaimed in shock. Could it be that they would fail again at this very instant? It should be known that the skies were already opened, and as long as Ling Han could hold on for a while longer, the whole lower realm would be able to ascend into the immortal realm. On the other side, a smirk appeared on the old woman's face. How terrifying were her true phoenix, divine flames. Even immortals on the same cultivation level would not dare take them head-on. What more a mere shattering void tier cultivator? But after an instant, the cold smirk on her face turned into shock. How was this possible? All could see it as Ling Han walked out of the flames. Although his whole body was still burning, his spirit and energy were still full of vigor, his vitality soaring straight up into the heavens. Brandishing the axe, he continued to split the sky open. "Your Majesty!" all the citizens exclaimed, every single one of them feeling such excitement they had goosebumps. This was really just like how the saying, at the end of the line, when there seemed nowhere they could go, there appeared light at the end of the tunnel, went. They had initially thought that everything would end at this point, and had never imagined that Ling Han would give them another surprise. After this feat, the belief that Ling Han was invincible was sown in the hearts of everyone. No matter how bad the situation seemed, their monarch would have a way to solve the problem. The hearts of the people united, and the power of the nation soared greatly. In the skies above the imperial city, the totem of the Black Tower glowed with golden light. A humming sound spread out, and the sound and light enveloped all territory, stretching out to all corners. The nation would become greatly prosperous. The purple-robed old woman wore a dark expression, and once again began her attacks. One after another, bullets of fire surged forth. If one took a closer look, they'd notice all of the fire bullets had godly patterns, shaped like a phoenix, their might incredibly frightening. Ling Han knew that his ability was not enough to stand against them, so he decided to simply not bother and merely brandish the mountain and river axe to slash ruthlessly at the skies, relying on his impressively strong physique to take them head-on. This was his real trump card. A physique as tough as godly metal. Just burn it if you could. If they were in the immortal realm, Ling Han would naturally not dare be so rash, but with the realms separated, what did he have to be afraid of? If her attacks could display their full might, that meant that the splitting open of the sky had succeeded, right? Open, open, open. With every wave of the axe, millions and millions of citizens would follow up with a cheer. They were unable to share Ling Han's burden, so they could only use this method to express their support for Ling Han. Not only the commoners did Sovin, the 7 kings, and Hellion Tianyin were all affected by the ambience, and were screaming alongside the ordinary citizens. Open, open, open. Ling Han, too, seemed to have gone mad. The flame bullets from the old woman were really a little scary. Even with his physique, there were signs of melting from the intense heat. Thus, he definitely could not allow his body to continue burning like this. He had to complete splitting open the sky as soon as possible. Otherwise, he could really be disintegrated by the flames. The old woman on the other side was also getting worried. The splitting open of the sky was just a hair's breadth from succeeding. If she could not stop them now, the lower realm would become a cooked duck that had escaped. She spared no effort and continued to attack, striking out endless flame bullets that transformed into a rain of fire that dropped from the immortal realm. "Open in my name." Ling Han delivered the last axe strike. This opening was big enough, and the attraction from the immortal realm instantly increased several hundred times further. The lower realm immediately sped up, crashing towards the immortal realm. It was like a baby bird that was bursting out of its egg. There was a great formation sealing them in from outside, but how could the barrage of a small world be something that could be blocked by a formation on the level of Mountain River Tier? The formation instantly collapsed. The whole mainland, along with the seas, rushed out together. Pung, pung, pung! In the vicinity, the purple-robed old woman, the white-haired old man, and the middle-aged man were all shaken by the impact and collapsed onto the ground, spewing out torrents of blood. They actually dared to stand in the way of splitting open the sky. This was the counterattack from the heavens and earth. They could only sprawl on the ground and watch helplessly as the lower realm flew towards the heavens, abruptly turning into a tiny that they had lost all sight of. Pung! Ling Han dropped down from the skies. He found out to his surprise that he actually could no longer fly. It was not that the pressure here caused him to be unable to fly, but rather some regulation had banned him from flying. However, he immediately realized the difference. The others had as well. They could not clearly explain what the difference was, but only felt their whole bodies were comfortably warm as if they were bathing inside a hot spring, feeling indescribably relaxed. They had entered into the immortal realm. From now on, they were no longer the ants of the lower realm, but the citizens of the immortal realm. Long live! Everyone cheered, feeling a heartfelt pride for their ruler. But very quickly, everyone had lost all ability to speak because the scenery around them was too dazzlingly beautiful. The lower realm, under the regulations of the immortal realm, began a long journey, traversing through the galaxy. Soon, they could see the mainland of the immortal realm they had previously spotted. From a colossal piece of land, it transformed into a ball, then became a dot. And in the boundless universe, there were uncountable numbers of such dots. Chapter 882, Boost of Fortune. Chapter 882, Boost of Fortune. Is every dot a great land like the one before? How is that possible? They are all circular, so wouldn't the people who stood on the other side fall off? Is the immortal realm so big? It is practically endless. Everyone was exclaiming in shock. They were used to their surroundings, and the lower realm was really just a piece of land, the sky circular and the land squarish. But here, the lands were circular, which had shattered their perception so far. What is that huge ball of fire? Is that the sun? But is the sun that big? So those multiple stars turned out to be various lands, circular lands. The lower realm was really flying too quickly. They had possibly surpassed any great elite of the immortal realm, and had instantly passed by uncountable galaxies and innumerable universes. Finally, its speed slowed down. Ahead of them, there appeared a gigantic planet. It was primarily covered with yellow earth, and the sky-blue ocean merely occupied a fifth of its entire expanse. The lower realm descended. Part of the earth was ripping open as if it was making room for it. One had to know that the lower realm was really quite big, but compared with this planet, it was pitifully small. They did not even reach 10,000th of its size. It would be a piece of cake for this planet to accommodate the whole lower realm. Hong! A muffled sound came from the earth. It was the mainland setting rigidly in place. An even denser spiritual qi surged forth and instantly led to a considerable many completing their breakthrough. The level here was too high. Even if they merely took a few breaths, it would be enough to let these mortals advance their cultivation level. Ling Han was also feeling internally restless. He had already reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier and was qualified to break through. However, he chose to suppress his breakthrough. It was slightly difficult to cultivate to the strength of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier in the lower realm. But this was the immortal realm, and there were explosively large amounts of resources of various kinds. Long live! Long live the Emperor! The whole mainland was cheering. Now, they had finally struggled free of the destiny of becoming raw materials, and had furthermore become the people of the immortal realm. Their level of existence had been greatly boosted, and in future, this boost would slowly be reflected. Above the imperial capital, the totem of the Black Tower became solid and was increasingly majestic. Innumerable streams of spiritual qi, as well as some indescribable, unknown substance, gushed into the totem of the Black Tower, and through this transmitted into the body of the person who had engraved his name on the totem of the Black Tower. Splitting open the sky was a great feat, and it would obtain the approval and reward from the heavens and earth. Ling Han discovered that his strength was in the process of rapidly increasing. 14 stars of Shattering Void tier, 15 stars, 16 stars. However, 2 days' time had also passed. A strength upgrade of a whole 3 stars was too frightening. This meant that his current battle prowess was close to reaching 30 stars of Shattering Void tier. Additionally, he discovered something had also changed with his physique. His spirit base moved, filled with godly traits. The one who split the sky open would be boosted with fortune. Something like fortune was indescribable, untouchable, and invisible, but it would really unleash its usefulness. The whole nation was celebrating. It was a day of great joy for all the citizens of the great Ling Empire. But this kind of wonderful atmosphere did not persist long. Very soon, an elite of this planet had arrived. Who is the nation's leader? An arrogant, disdainful voice sounded. A person was standing above the imperial palace. He was an immortal. Ling Han's present battle prowess was close to 30 stars of Shattering Void tier. But from the first moment he saw the speaker, he knew that he could not possibly be a match for the latter. The gap was too big. Even the weakest kind of immortal would be several thousand times stronger than the most monstrous, Shattering Void tier cultivator. Now, there was no realm barrier separating them anymore. Immortals were real immortals, without the slightest decrease to their actual power. Before splitting open the sky, Ling Han was already prepared. Thus, without a change of expression, he merely said calmly, "I am here." "Oh." The person was a man that seemed to be in his 30s, with a tall and thin figure. He deliberately revealed his ability, and there was a shadowy image of a tall mountain behind him. This meant that he was in the mountain river tier, but he had only reached the minor layers of mountain river tier at most. Because the tier was called mountain river tier, how could he be considered complete where there was only a mountain but no river? In the immortal realm, this was the lowest ranked elite, but they could still be called elites as they could crush all people of the lower realm. "I am the special envoy of the Eastern Void Royal Empire, Yin Yongi. Since you are the nation's leader, then immediately deliver up your national book and declare yourself subject to my empire," he said calmly, looking extremely indifferent. In his eyes, it was a natural turn of events. How many immortals were there in the Eastern Void Royal Empire? They numbered in the millions. Any one of them would be able to destroy this new world. So wasn't declaring themselves subject to their authority a natural turn of events? Hearing these words, all the citizens in the imperial capital looked angered. After this feat of splitting open the sky, everyone now thought of Ling Han as a real god, an invincible emperor. How could an emperor suffer such humiliation? "Ho ho!" Even the Eastern Void Royal Empire would dare to vie for this new territory with my Content Water Royal Empire? Xiao, another person appeared suddenly and quickly, standing above the imperial palace to stand opposite of Yan Yongyi. Ha ha ha! Have you all forgotten my Thunder Central Royal Empire? A third immortal arrived. Ling Han had heard Yi Shuang say before that land and citizens were all extremely valuable resources in the immortal realm because they would have an effect on power of the nation. Now that a new mainland had come from a small world, what force would not want to have a share of the loot? More importantly, splitting open the sky would be rewarded by the heavens and earth, and if one could swallow up the power of the nation of the Great Ling Empire, it would be extremely nutritious for the nation and their own power of the nation. Ling Han stood solemnly and silently. He had long made himself prepared, yet could also control the price and sell for a good price. He at least wanted to sell themselves off to a relatively powerful force. Then, after he left, the Great Ling Empire would be relatively safe, and there was no need to worry about it being invaded. Xiao, amidst the flicker of brilliant light, an air vessel arrived, traveling through the air. Abruptly, those three immortals showed expressions of utmost seriousness. The immortal realm had the rules of the immortal realm. Those that could fly with only their physical bodies were definitely great elites, but possessing a god tool that allowed flight also implied a formidable background. Putting aside all others, those immortals that had arrived first had all raced over on their own two legs. They had only arrived first because they were nearer. On board of this air vessel, there stood a man dressed in white robes that fluttered in the breeze. Appearance-wise, he looked to be only 26 or 27 years old, but those who were able to become immortals had extraordinarily long lifespans, so their age naturally could not be judged by appearance. There was a treasured sword slung on his back. He did not show his aura, and there was no way to estimate his cultivation level just from his appearance. Chaotic Star's majestic empire. When everyone saw a symbol emblazoned on the air vessel, they were immediately filled with apprehension and revealed their respect. Just like in the lower realm, where the names of sect, faction, and society could not be used arbitrarily, it was the same in the immortal realm. Imperial Empire, Majestic Empire, and Royal Empire all represented absolutely different levels of power. With an overseer of the Sun-Moon tier, a faction could establish a nation in the immortal realm and set up a royal empire. Meanwhile, a Majestic Empire required an elite of the Heavenly Body tier, whereas Imperial Empire needed an elite of the Eternal River tier. This could absolutely not be messed up. Of course, an existence like the Great Ling Empire was naturally going by a different standard because it had risen from the lower realm. Are you the nation's leader? The white-robed man looked at Ling Han, smiled, and said, I am Shang Qingyun, and am under the authority of the Lord Left Minister of the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire. Lord Shang. Ling Han clasped his hands in greeting. This was the immortal realm. There was a need for him to put away all his pride. However, it was an easy thing to put away his pride, but difficult to bend his proud personality. In his bones he was still a very forceful person, and possessed a pride that preferred death to dishonor. Chapter 883, Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire. Chapter 883, Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire. Beyond expectations, this Shang Qingyun was actually very amiable and did not put on the airs of an elite. It made Ling Han feel very rueful. The more noble their background, the more modest and unassuming they were. Of course, this Shang Qingyun still possessed a deep-set pride to him. He was quite obviously standing there, yet took not one of the envoys from the Royal Empire seriously. Shang Qingyun was here on behalf of the Lord Left Minister, so his purpose was naturally to subjugate the Great Ling Empire so that it would become a subject of the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire and, to speak bluntly, to become a subordinate force under the Lord Left Minister. The Majestic Empire was too powerful, and a minor force that had just descended after opening the sky was completely beneath its notice. Ling Han asked the other about the basic distribution of power in this place, and Shang Qingyin did not hide anything, but instead told him the truth. This planet was called Joint Peace Planet. There was a total of 3 great majestic empires on it, namely the Chaotic Stars Majestic Empire, Eternity Sky Majestic Empire, and Jade Drop Royal Empire. Beneath these 3 majestic empires, there were hundreds of royal empires. The 3 great majestic empires were equal in power and had warred with each other for many years, each wanting to annex the others. And this had also allowed room for the royal empires to survive. They were all subjects of one of the majestic empires and fought with each other over territory and people very intensely. Thus, the moment the Great Ling Empire opened the sky and appeared, the surrounding royal empires immediately sent their envoys, but they had not imagined that the Chaotic Stars Majestic Empire had also moved. Even if it was just a representative of the left minister, that still caused the other royal empires to give up. Fight with a majestic empire? Had they grown tired of existing? After another while, the envoys sent by the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire and Jade Drop Majestic Empire also arrived, wanting to take the Great Ling Empire in as their subordinate force. This was not because the Great Ling Empire had massive territory and masses of people, but because they had come through opening the sky, so their power of the nation was very beneficial for their respective majestic empires. After some consideration, Ling Han decided to temporarily rely on the assistance of the Chaotic Stars Majestic Empire. Firstly, it would not be possible for him to choose one of them, although they looked to be all smiles and easy to deal with. If they really became hostile, that would definitely not be any slower than flipping the page of a book. Then, if it was necessary to choose one of them, the Chaotic Stars Majestic Empire was still the best because the Great Ling Empire's current location was closest to the Chaotic Stars Majestic Empire. This was for the sake of the safety of their nation. Ling Han wrote the national book and handed it over to Shang Qingyin. From now onwards, the Great Ling Empire would be a vassal state of the Chaotic Stars Majestic Empire. It had to offer tribute and obey it, whereas the Chaotic Stars Majestic Empire would be responsible for protecting the Great Ling Empire. The moment the national book was handed over, the shadowy image of a 9-tailed divine fox flew out from Shang Qingyun's body. It delivered a heavy bite towards the totem of the Black Tower above the imperial capital, and it was instantly as if the totem of the Black Tower had been heavily wounded and became blurry. Meanwhile, everyone in the Great Ling Empire experienced a feeling of grief. This was a humiliation of their nation, for they were forced to declare themselves subjects to others. Although they had all prepared themselves long ago, there were still many that felt great fury, wanting nothing more than to have a fierce battle. However, even more had retained their senses. They had just entered the immortal realm. So what right did they have to compete with the forces of the immortal realm? If you are not willing to submit, then you have to work hard on your cultivation. Without power, you can only bear with it. Just think of His Majesty. He has to endure it. If it wasn't for the sake of this nation, His Majesty could completely let go and leave. The world is so big, so what place could not accommodate His Majesty? With His Majesty's genius, he would definitely be able to rise up very quickly in this immortal realm. Since His Majesty has chosen to endure for our sake, how could we possibly disappoint His Majesty? I want to become stronger. I want to share His Majesty's burden. The citizens did not collapse because of this humiliation. Instead, they knew their shame and grew brave because of it. All of them felt choked and were determined to give their all in cultivation so that the Great Ling Empire would be able to regard the whole world superciliously and need not bow to any force. Lord Monarch, please follow me to our imperial capital and pay respects to the Lord Left Minister. Shang Qingyin said with a smile. This trip had been successfully completed, which made him feel very pleased. He even felt Ling Han was easier on the eyes. Ling Han had long made arrangements for everything, so he nodded and stepped onto the air vessel together with Shang Qingyin. He took a last look at the imperial capital and thought quietly, "I will definitely return." "Your Majesty." Everyone knelt. Even the 7 kings knelt on one knee and nodded. As they watched Ling Han leave, their eyes were red. Ling Han nodded and said, "Cultivate well, don't disappoint me." "We shall obey your imperial decree," they all declared loudly. Shang Qingyun chucked and steered the air vessel. Xiao! The air vessel instantly ripped through the air. This vessel was too fast. It was like a shooting star, which made Ling Han extremely stunned. He had already tried it out before, in the immortal realm. His speed had at least slowed down by 100 times because the regulations of this place were different. In comparison with this flying vessel, he was as slow as a snail. On the journey, Ling Han humbly asked for guidance, and the other gradually no longer put up any airs, and addressed Ling Han directly by his name. It was an improvement. The repetitive addressing of him as monarch, in truth, seemed to be more of a taunt, as if to remind Ling Han that he was currently a hostage. The monarch of the chaotic star's majestic empire was an empress. She was at the perfection level of the heavenly body tier, and her power was unfathomable. This empress had not married yet. Apparently, not only was she as beautiful as a fairy, she was also extremely lovely. There had once been rumors that the monarchs of the 2 great majestic empires of Eternity Sky and Jade Drop were both willing to surrender their thrones as long as the empress of the chaotic star's majestic empire was willing to marry them. Although this was only a rumor, one could see how extremely enchanting this empress was from it. Beneath the empress there were the 9 kings, and all the 9 kings were female. The strongest had even reached perfection of the heavenly body tier, whereas the weakest was still in the mountain river tier, and had just been bestowed her title a few years ago. As for why she could be bestowed the title of king when she was only in mountain river tier, that was known to no one. In the chaotic star's majestic empire, the empress was the ultimate authority. No one would dare or was able to question her supreme authority. Beneath the 9 kings, there was the left and right minister. These 2 people were old rivals, and now that they had become irreconcilable, this was naturally the deliberate intention of the empress of the chaotic star's majestic empire. This was a means to balance out the power in the court. The left and right minister were definitely aware of it as well. Thus, even if they actually did not want to oppose one another, they still had to do so. Otherwise, they would definitely lose imperial favor or even be suppressed. These 2 were also extremely powerful. Rumor had it that they were at the minor levels of the heavenly body tier. Of course, that was completely incomparable to the empress. Additionally, there were also the 7 generals. In terms of political power, they were slightly weaker than the 2 ministers, but their abilities were not weak. They, too, were beings in the minor levels of the heavenly body tier. However, the 2 ministers were responsible for internal affairs, whereas the 7 generals took charge of external affairs and were responsible of commanding the military forces and defenses. Ling Han casually listened to Shang Qingyun speak of the various military and civil officials. For the exact details, he could slowly make his inquiries once they reached the imperial capital. Ling Han, you were able to open the sky to enter into the mortal realm, so your talent is naturally impressive. You can enroll in the Scarlet Heaven Academy to study for a while. After Shang Qingyun briefly talked about the power structure of the chaotic star's majestic empire, he made this suggestion to Ling Han. "Please teach me, sir," Ling Han said humbly. "The Scarlet Heaven Academy is the largest and best academy in our empire. All other things aside, the juniors of the left and right minister and the 7 generals are all studying there." Shang Qingyun said with a smile. "I, too, had the fortune of staying in the Scarlet Heaven Academy for 387 years. Unfortunately, due to inadequate talent, I was still cast out in the end." He paused for a moment, then continued, "If you are able to meet some high-ranking officials and nobles there, then it would make for some sort of relations. Even if you are not able to return to your own nation, You will at least be able to move freely within the territory of our empire, and would no longer have to be trapped in the imperial capital. As per the agreement, Ling Han, as a hostage, could only remain in the imperial capital. If he took one step out of it, it could be regarded as a challenge to the imperial authority, and he could be directly executed for it. Ling Han nodded, and quickly questioned the other about the exact details of the Scarlet Heaven Academy. To be honest, if he wanted to break through to the immortal level, he would have to obtain an immortal level cultivation technique. In terms of body arts, he had the 9 Dragons Tyrant body art, but in terms of origin power, there was nothing he could do. Without the guidance of a cultivation technique, he could only mull over it himself, and that would be too time-consuming. Chapter 884, 4th Young Mississippi. Chapter 884, 4th Young Mississippi. Xiang Qingyan talked for the whole journey, and Ling Han listened the whole way. When they reached the imperial capital of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, Ling Han had a considerable understanding of the Scarlet Heaven Academy. This top academy in the imperial capital of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire had existed for more than 100 millennia. After many years of development, it was divided into the northern, southern, eastern, and western institutions. Although they were all in the imperial capital, they could be considered for independent institutions and had a fiercely competitive relationship with one another. If Ling Han wanted to enroll in the Scarlet Heaven Academy, with his status as the monarch of a nation, he would only need to speak to the left minister, and his enrollment into the academy would definitely be a small matter. However, I would advise you to best enter based on your own merits, Xiang Qingyun said. After another 10 days, the Northern Institution will hold the enrollment ceremony that would take place once every 20 years. If you are able to show an excellent performance, then you will be able to gain the focused, nurturing, and attention from the institution. Otherwise, Lord Left Minister indeed can easily send you into the institution, but you will only become an ordinary student. Ling Han knew that the 4 institutions held their enrollment ceremonies separately from each other. There would be a chance once every 5 years. If one could pass the enrollment test and get in based on his own merits, then the more excellent his results, the more it was possible that he would be able to gain the focused attention of the institution. He would be able to gain an incline in terms of cultivation resources. Naturally, he would also be able to gain an immortal level cultivation technique. This year, it was the Northern Institution's turn to enroll new students. 5 years later, it would be the Eastern Institution's turn, and after another 5 years, it would be the Southern Institution. It was a 20-year cycle. However, if one wanted to enroll into the Scarlet Heaven Academy, then the minimum requirement was the Shattering Void tier. Every institution was further divided into 5 levels, which corresponded with the 4 minor levels of the Shattering Void tier and the Mountain River tier. As for those who had reached the peak of the Mountain River tier, then sorry, but if you wanted to continue to ascend further than that, you would have to think of something on your own. For example, you could become the disciple of some elite, join some powerful force, or simply set out to explore ancient historical sites to obtain higher-level cultivation techniques. Ling Han now did not need to consider the things after Mountain River tier. After entering the Scarlet Heaven Academy, he could at least learn cultivation techniques all the way up to the Mountain River tier. He had to get in. Ling Han pondered. He had just arrived in the immortal realm, and was still a stranger in a strange place. He needed a place to stay so he could calmly observe this world, and as the Alchemy Emperor, there was definitely ample scope for him to showcase his abilities. The imperial capital of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire was named Point Star City, and was astonishingly huge. It was at least 100 times the size of the imperial capital of the Great Ling Empire. One could see the light of formations flickering on all 4 sides of the imperial city. From afar they could explode with terrifying might at any moment. According to Xiang Qingyun, if any immortals below the heavenly body tier dared to barge in forcefully, they would be killed directly by the formations. There was no other possibility. After arriving, even if Xiang Qingyun was the subordinate of the left minister, He could only obediently steer his air vessel downwards and go through the official procedures to enter into the city. After helping Ling Han get temporary identification papers, the two of them entered into the city and headed towards the Left Minister Manor. The Left Minister was one of the masters at the power peak of this powerful, majestic empire, so his manor was naturally incredibly big. It was definitely not inferior to Ling Han's imperial palace in any way, and was built from materials that were definitely 100 times, 1,000 times more precious. Looking from afar, one would be able to see that there were images of true dragons and true phoenixes flying around above the manor, making for a very grand and majestic sight. If even the manor of the Left Minister was like this, then how would the palace of the Empress look like? Xiang Qingyin arrived at the manor's entrance, showed proof of his identity, and brought Ling Han inside. He seemed to have considerable status in the manor, as servants would all respectfully bow and pay respects to him on the way. Very soon, they arrived at an elegant courtyard. Xiang Qingyin had Ling Han sit down on a stone stool by the side and wait, whereas he himself entered indoors to inform the Left Minister. Theoretically, with the fact that Ling Han had yet to even enter into a mortal level, he was absolutely not qualified to meet personally with the Left Minister. However, Ling Han still had the identity of the monarch of the great Ling Empire, and furthermore had successfully opened the sky. This was quite extraordinary, and the Left Minister became interested in meeting Ling Han. Ling Han waited quietly. Sha, sha, sha. After a while, the sound of footsteps were heard from the bushes. Ling Han turned around, only to see a young girl strolling over. She was dressed in a long skirt as green as lake water. It had a very fitting cut and completely outlined her shapely figure. However, because it was a skirt, it allowed her to exude a more graceful and spirited feeling. This young girl looked to be only 16 or 17 years old. She was incredibly beautiful, her almond eyes curved, yet showing a hint of mischief. One look, and he could tell she was the young Miss type with a lot of weird ideas. She was at the shattering void tier in its 9th layer. As for her battle prowess, he could not tell how many stars she had reached just from appearance alone. If this young girl was really only 16 or 17, then it would be shocking. However, this was the immortal realm, and it was not uncommon to see shattering void tier elites who were younger than 20 here. For example, weren't Xiao Miaoyan and Wu Gaoyuan and their likes the same? Besides, the Left Minister's power was much stronger than the 5 sects, so it would be nothing surprising for an even younger shattering void tier elite to appear here. This young girl obviously spotted Ling Han as well. She crossed her arms behind her back, walked towards Ling Han, and then circled around him once. Pursing her lips, she said, "Kid, which clan's junior are you? Here to go through my daddy's back door so you can stuff yourself into the Scarlet Heaven Academy. Let me tell you, young people have to depend on themselves. For example, even though I am the 4th young miss, didn't I also follow the rules, now preparing to pass the test of the Northern Institution to enter into the academy?" The young girl spoke in a very mature tone, as if she was educating someone. She was the 4th daughter of the Left Minister. Xiang Qingyin would naturally not share gossip about the Left Minister's private life with him. Thus, Ling Han also had no idea how Mei Sun's daughters and other juniors the Left Minister had. He smiled calmly and said, "I think 4th young miss has misunderstood. The other party thought of him as someone who had come to get in through the back door, to enroll into the Scarlet Heaven Academy with the help of the Left Minister." "What did I misunderstand?" the young girl said in its Sundra way. Her jade-like, beautiful face was extremely dazzling and indescribably good-looking. "I indeed plan on entering into the Scarlet Heaven Academy, but have no intention of asking for the Lord Left Minister's help. Instead, I plan to pass the enrollment test myself and get in on my own," Ling Han explained with a smile. "Yo, after hearing my words, you've become stubborn." The young girl laughed loudly. "Fine then, let's spar. Let me see how much ability you have." Ling Han shook his head and answered, "I am a few years older than you. So if I fought you, I'd be a bully. Che, you are in the 9th layer of Shattering Void tier, and so am I. Who's afraid? The young girl was obviously an undisciplined and uncontrollable young miss. She immediately leaped at Ling Han, her slender hand delivering a palm strike aimed right at Ling Han's chest. However, though she was unruly, she was not a bad person. This palm strike only had 70% of her power behind it, as she had withdrawn the other 30%. If Ling Han was not her match, then she would draw back all her power so that she would not wound Ling Han. Ling Han casually blocked, and Peng power spread out. The two of them stepped back at the same time. Ling Han retreated 7 steps, while the young girl merely took 3 steps back. It was not that Ling Han was not strong enough, but rather that he had only used a bit of his power. But he still nodded internally. This young girl's battle prowess had actually reached 16 stars, and this had already surpassed the 8 kings. It was only inferior to the likes of Xiao Miayan. However, she obviously still had a lot of space for improvement. It would be very, very difficult for her to reach a battle prowess of 20 stars in the future, but it was still possible for her to reach 19 stars. Chapter 885, depending on you. Chapter 885, depending on you. I couldn't tell, but you do have a bit of ability. The young girl appeared surprised. The difference of a single star of Shattering Void tier meant a world of difference, and in the mortal realm, this applied as well. Starting from 9 stars of Shattering Void tier, there were pitifully few that had more than 10 stars of battle prowess, and 14 stars was yet another great barrier. If there was 1 in 100 that could reach battle prowess above 10 stars of Shattering Void tier, then there was at most only 1 in 10,000 that could achieve 15 stars of battle prowess. Although the young girl had not given it her all, her casual strike was still at least worth 13 to 14 stars of battle prowess. But the other party was actually able to match her evenly, which naturally caused her to feel slightly shocked. Again, her competitive spirit had been incited, and she immediately started to deliver a rain of attacks on Ling Han. Ling Han, as one who had lived 2 lifetimes, knew that this kind of young miss was not someone to trifle with. It would be all right if he lost, but if he won, she would definitely not drop the matter. However, he also had his pride, so why was there a need for him to lose? Thus, he casually parried and blocked, maintaining the situation in which neither of them had the upper hand. After repetitive, unsuccessful attacks, the young girl's temper flared up, and she no longer thought about withholding her power. As her hands flew out in blows, she gave it her full effort, determined to defeat Ling Han. Unfortunately, Ling Han had presently reached 16 stars merely in pure strength alone, and as the saying went, a physically strong person would be able to defeat 10 opponents skilled in technique. So even if he did not use any technique, he was able to suppress her fully. Ling Han naturally would not do that. He merely maintained the stalemate, and even allowed the young girl to feel as if she was slightly having the upper hand, though she was still unable to completely dominate him. The space in the immortal realm was indeed sturdy. Yet Ling Han's thoughts had strayed elsewhere. If 2 great elites with battle prowess of 16 stars of Shattering Void tier fought it out in the lower realm, then he presumed that not just this garden, but even the whole Point Star City would undoubtedly explode. But now, the waves of power they created actually just shook a few tree leaves in the garden, just as if they had returned to the body refining tier. Pung, pung, pung. The 2 people fought vigorously, but it was practically the young girl on the attack, whereas Ling Han was purely on defense. Good men would not fight with women, so what could he prove by winning against this young girl? Presently, Ling Han only wanted to defeat the 5 sects and the AO clan, whereas in the future he wished to surpass the elites of the Rock Palace. Wei Wei, stop! An austere voice rang out. Ling Han was on the defense in the first place, merely wanting her to stop and not intending to fight back. Thus, he naturally withdrew as well, leaving the decision in the hands of the young girl. No, I want to defeat him. I'm just a breath away. the young girl declared with a pout and adorable naivete. Two people walked outdoors. One was a man that looked to be only in his 40s, dressed in a Chilean robe, giving off an air of might without expressing any anger. The other was Xiang Qingyin. He was respectfully following behind this man, his hands stuck on either side of him as if he was a servant. Needless to say, this middle-aged man was the left minister of the empire, Li Cheng, also known as Minister Li, a super elite of the heavenly body tier. You little girl, could it be that you still do not know that he is going easy on you after such a long fight? Minister Li asked, smiling. What? The young girl immediately stopped. Tilting her head to one side, she looked at Ling Han and asked, Hey, tell me the truth. Were you purposely going easy on me? Fourth young miss has extraordinary talent and ability. Ling Han did not answer directly, but instead circled around and began to praise the young girl's talent in martial arts. This was not mere flattery from him, though, as she was indeed very extraordinary. The young girl was instantly all smiles, not realizing that Ling Han had changed the topic. She proudly raised her head, her snow-white nape showing off her elegance as if it was the neck of a swan. One would feel pleased just from looking at her. Her name was Li Weiwei, the fourth and youngest daughter of the left minister. The left minister had a total of 4 daughters. The right minister, on the other hand, had 8 sons, and they really deserved to be called rivals. Minister Li said, Girl, did you know that this young man has just come from a small world? Oh, isn't it just shattering the empty void? Li Weiwei said carelessly, with how big the Joint Peace Planet, there was a good several thousand people that ascended here from a small world every year, and on average, there are at least a dozen every day. You just shattered the empty void after reaching the 9th layer of the shattering void tier. You are really one with little courage. She was a bit disdainful. Stepping into the shattering void tier, one would be qualified to shatter the void to enter into the immortal realm. Even if you were the more careful type, then you should have acted the moment you reached the 5th or 6th layer, but you came to the immortal realm only after dragging it out into the 9th layer. Really, what a scaredy cat. Minister Li revealed an astute smile and asked, Weiwei, why don't we have a wager? What kind of wager? Li Weiwei asked without thinking too deeply. We'll just wager on the outcome of the battle between you and Ling Han. Minister Li smiled. If you win, I will not attempt to control you any more in the future, and you can go wherever you like to play. All right, you're not allowed to weasel out. Li Weiwei was immediately pleased. She had always wanted to leave the imperial capital and travel around, but Minister Li would keep worrying about this and that, and protected her very securely. She was afraid that her father would take back his words, and immediately put up a fighting stance, ready to start fighting Ling Han at any moment. Minister Li spread out his hands in front of him and said, If you lose. How could I possibly lose? Li Weiwei interrupted. In the current era, only a shattering void tier cultivator like her would dare to interrupt the words of an elite of the heavenly body tier. Minister Li was naturally not going to become angry. Although he had 4 daughters, his first 3 daughters had married a few millennia ago already. This youngest daughter, meanwhile, had been born just over a dozen years ago, and was also the one that he doted on the most. If you lose, then you will have to be at least in the mountain river tier to be able to leave the imperial capital, and reach the sun-moon tier to be able to leave the territory of the chaotic star's majestic empire, he said, smiling. No matter how his daughter thought about it, there was no reason to lose. Fine, Li Weiwei nodded. Presently, she only wanted to defeat Ling Han. Then, she would be able to leave the imperial capital and travel to various nations and lands, enjoying a life of freedom. Xiao! She rushed out and began her attacks on Ling Han. Ling Han was still as how he had been, casually blocking and parrying. He had no intention of becoming a tool in the wager between this father and daughter, but it seemed to be unavoidable. Ling Han, I'm depending on you. You have to win. Minister Li smiled as he said to Ling Han, Although he was all smiles, he had an air of supreme authority about him, which was both because he was an elite of the heavenly body tier and because he was the left minister of a majestic empire. Ling Han gave out a sigh. If he disobeyed, then the left minister would definitely make life difficult for him. This kind of elite, this kind of noble, it would be really too easy for him to deal with Ling Han. It was absolutely impossible that anyone would be willing to stand up for him. Furthermore, even if the left minister killed him, they could always put another puppet in place. He increased a bit of his battle prowess and instantly gained the upper hand. However, he still left some face for Li Weiwei and merely defeated her after over 100 moves. Li Weiwei could not accept this. How could this be? Possibly a lower realm cultivator was so fearful that he had to wait until he reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier to dare to enter into the immortal realm, actually surpassed her in battle prowess. She shook her head blankly. After a while she said, "I do not yield, we'll battle again." Minister, Li finally laughed loudly and said, "Silly girl, Ling Han is the master of the small world. He had opened the sky successfully just a few days ago, bringing along the whole small world with him to ascend into the immortal realm." Ah! It was only now Li Weiwei realized that she had misunderstood previously. It turned out that Ling Han was not fearful of death, but rather dragged things out to the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier because he wanted to split open the sky. Those capable of opening the sky were definitely the prodigies of the era. She had fallen into the trap. Both Ling Han and her old man had fooled her together. Despicable. Too despicable. She was angry now. Chapter 886 Offended. Chapter 886 Offended. Li Weiwei glared at Ling Han. "It's bad enough that my father lied to me. You are just a stranger. What right do you have to bully me? How have I offended you that you would treat me like this? Haha, now you must accept the consequences of losing the bet. You shall henceforth attend the Scarlet Heaven Academy. Don't keep thinking of running around." Minister, Li said sternly. He was really fearful that this precious daughter of his would lose her temper and adopt a confrontational stance instead. Li Weiwei pouted her small lips. "I naturally won't disobey my father's command, but this brat, humph! I won't let him off easy, and shall punish him until he begs for mercy." Ling Han's feelings were only expressed through his eyes. He knew that this young lady wouldn't be willing to leave the matter to rest as it was. But what could be done? The left minister had already put it this way: if he were to deliberately lose to Li Weiwei, then he would be going against the left minister. The consequences resulting from the two choices would be completely different. However, he had nothing to fear if it was only this kind of crafty and unruly young lady. He was only fearful if the other party would bring out some immortal-level elite of the immortal realm. If Ling Han did not wish to expose the secret of the Black Tower, he could only restrain his annoyance at the moment. "It is best not to force me," Ling Han said to himself. He might seem to be easygoing, but this in fact clashed with his proud and unyielding character. If worse comes to worst, then let the matter be resolved in battle. Haha, Weiwei, you ought to learn more from Ling Han. He had come here by splitting open the sky. Who knows how much greater his martial arts talent will be compared to yours? Minister Li used Ling Han as an example with the intention to properly educate his daughter. If this sentence had been directed to any subordinate, the other party would have shown great reverence and even put up an appearance of sincerely asking Ling Han for guidance. But why would Li Weiwei care? Had she really intended to be obedient, why would the left minister have needed to put up a front and intentionally set up a trap with the bet? Even an extremely powerful person would also have a weak spot. The weak spot of Minister Li was obviously this young daughter, so thoroughly spoiled that he was even reluctant to rebuke her. Li Weiwei was still groaning, staring intently at Ling Han with her beautiful eyes. Naturally, she was not the least bit convinced, but she was quite curious. This brat does not seem to possess any kind of remarkable abilities. Why was he capable of splitting open the sky? Every year, It was not uncommon for thousands of shattering void tier cultivators from the lower realms to enter the immortal realm. But those who had come by splitting open the sky had never appeared before, at least not in the history of the chaotic star's majestic empire. He was a man who had created history. Originally, she would have been very curious, but now she only has one thought in mind: to make this puffed-up, two-faced brat pay dearly for daring to trick her. She cleared her throat and said that was just him being able to cultivate to a slightly more powerful level of the shattering void tier. He might not necessarily be able to break through to the immortal level. If he isn't able to reach the immortal level, then no matter how monstrously powerful he is, won't he still be suppressed easily? Moreover, there are 5 great tiers within the immortal level, which is further divided into 20 minor layers, with each step being much more difficult than the last. That's plenty to climb, so there's nothing to be proud of. Minister Li burst out laughing and shook his head. You are not as skilled as the other party. You have already lost, but still dare to look down on others? Oh, I was just careless. Li Weiwei ran to Minister Li. Tugging at his arm, she stared at Ling Han, pointing at him. Whatever, Han, we shall have another match 10 days later, but this time it will be at the enrollment of the Northern Institution. I do not believe that I'm not able to defeat you. At this stage, conceding wouldn't make the other party give up, but instead make her look down upon him with even more disdain. Ling Han smiled lightly and said, Sure, then we will just have another match at that time. His response was mild and light-hearted, as if he did not take the matter seriously at all. Li Weiwei was so angry that she wanted to stomp her foot. This outrageous brat! How dares he disregard me like this? One should know that she was one of the 3 great beauties in the imperial capital. Who knew how many juniors of generals or important officials wanted to marry her? Yet, she paid no heed to them. You are just a country boy, but act like a snob. No, I can't wait for 10 days. If I have to endure such vexation for 10 days, I will definitely explode. Li Weiwei immediately turned around and left. She had to look for someone to lend her a hand in suppressing Ling Han. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to get any sleep tonight. This young woman was used to being willful minister. Li couldn't do anything about it. He really wasn't able to put on a serious face and berate her, so he could only shake his head and give a bitter smile. Then his expression immediately turned businesslike as he said to Ling Han, Do tell me more about your small world and the situation of splitting open the sky. Ling Han gave a mostly truthful account of the entire situation. Naturally, he mentioned neither the Black Tower nor the fact that he had a past life. There was also some other important information which he had withheld, such as the Rock Palace and the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, which had nothing to do with the splitting open of the sky. The left minister was quite a cautious person. Only after inquiring about every detail regarding the splitting open of the sky did he nod and say, according to Qingyun, You wish to enter the Scarlet Heaven Academy yourself? Yes. Ling Han answered respectfully. Although he had lived 2 lifetimes as a human, he really didn't know how many millennia younger he was compared to the left minister. Furthermore, the latter was also an elite of the heavenly body tier, so it was only right that Ling Han accorded him some respect. In the world of martial arts, the strong would always be respected. However, Ling Han would never bow to another. Given his proud and unyielding character, how could he bring himself to go down on his knees or bend his waist? Minister Li smiled and said, Since you can split open the sky, your battle prowess must have reached 20 stars of shattering void tier. Among the new students in this batch, your battle prowess should be the strongest. However, the enrollment of the Scarlet Heaven Academy isn't based on battle prowess, but rather martial arts talent, the strength of one's spirit, and battle skills. If you want to enter the top 10 or even the top 3, it will be very difficult. He was totally not optimistic about Ling Han. How could the cultivators of a small world be more talented than the geniuses here? Not to mention that with the guidance of immortal level elites, there was no comparison when it came to battle skills. either. How much of a gap would it be compared to the cultivators of a small world? And the spirit was the biggest shortcoming of cultivators of a small world. They had only begun to cultivate the spirit after reaching the shattering void tier. However, descendants of influential officials like Li Weiwei would have gotten a variety of treasures to nurture their spirit from birth. So, even if it was only 10 to 20 years, how many times stronger would their spirit be compared to those of cultivators from a small world? Therefore, if it was a competition on battle prowess, then Ling Han would basically be first place. However, according to the usual areas of assessment by the Scarlet Heaven Academy, entering the top 10 would be extremely difficult for Ling Han. One more getting first place. I am willing to give it a try, Ling Han said. He had full of confidence in himself. Minister Li nodded. Given his cultivation level and status, having made time to see Ling Han was really already giving a lot of face to the latter. It was mainly because Ling Han had come by splitting open the sky, which was very rare, so he wanted to meet him once. Since he had met Ling Han, he then gave him a few words of encouragement, as the latter would be his subordinate, after all. In these 10 days, you will live here first. When you have entered the Scarlet Heaven Academy, then you may move there. Ling Han nodded and said, I appreciate your hospitality. For Qingyin, there was no need for Minister Li to speak out at all, and he had already gestured Ling Han to take his leave, saying, Lord Left Minister needs to rest now, so I shall bring you to settle down in a side courtyard. The two went out. Stroking his beard, Minister Li murmured, even though his talent may not be the best, seeing that he could come here by splitting open the sky, there must be something extraordinary about him. If there are any skills that shine during the enrollment, it would be worthwhile for me to nurture him. After all, that time is coming soon. Chapter 887, Luo Lai. Chapter 887, Luo Lai. Xiang Chengyun guided Ling Han to a different courtyard. The left minister's residence was indeed vast. There was more than 100 guest rooms. Each one was well-proportioned and beautifully decorated, just like a delicate piece of artwork, causing observers to have a kind of irresistible urge to go in and disrupt the aesthetic perception. The left minister was a very busy man, and this popular figure serving under the left minister did not seem to be very free. Either after making arrangements for Ling Han's stay, he politely informed Ling Han that the latter might seek him out should any matter come up, then turned around and left. Ling Han certainly knew that Xiang Qingyin was merely being courteous towards him. What was his own identity? In fact, he was no different from the sovereign of a defeated country. Moreover, he hadn't even stepped into the immortal level. So how could he make others hold him in high regard? One's status ought to be earned through strength, not by crying or begging for it. Was the left minister given a high status when he was young? Was the Empress of Chaotic Stars declared the sovereign of an empire when she was young? They all had to start from scratch. Ling Han's attitude was quite placid. His current concern was entering the Scarlet Heaven Academy and learning alchemical and martial arts, advancing greatly in both areas. As for the art of battle formations, he would learn it if he had excess energy. Should he be too busy, then he could only give up on that subject. Biting off more than one could chew wasn't a good thing. When he was in the lower realm, it was because he had experienced 2 lifetimes as a mortal that he could afford learning all 3. But now that he had used up all the insider information that he possessed, everything had to start from scratch. The first step was to improve his strength up to 20 stars of shattering void tier. Within the immortal level, those who could cross over a minor layer in battle were known as 1-star genius. Following this logic, there were also 2-star genius, 3-star genius, and 4-star genius. According to Yi Shuang, she had come across ancient scriptures which mentioned that there was once a 5-star genius. In the immortal realm, such geniuses were as rare as the feathers of a phoenix. However, just because Yi Shuang hadn't heard of it did not mean that there was none here. After all, the distance between the 2 realms was far beyond description. Ling Han did not want to consider so much as long as he perfected his cultivation at each layer. Why should he be afraid when he was to battle with another at the same cultivation level? Pung, 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 pung. He had wanted to cultivate and raise the strength of his spirit, but didn't expect the courtyard door to be pounded upon loudly, and so anxiously as if someone was going to die. The person knocking on the door had to be a very impatient man. Ling Han walked over and opened the courtyard door. He saw a young man and woman standing at the door. The woman was someone whom he had just met earlier. She was precisely the youngest daughter of the left minister, Miss Li Weiwei. The man looked about 20 years old, but there was some fine facial hair at the corner of his mouth, indicating that he was really young. Luo Lai, go. Beat him up. Li Weiwei pointed at Ling Han as if she was ordering a dog. The young man was naturally Luo Lai. He was a descendant of a high-ranking official in the imperial capital and also a genius. He had ambitions to marry Li Weiwei, the beloved daughter of the left minister, so he would come by the left minister's residence when he had the time. He also had an older brother named Luo Ba, who was only 2 years older than him. He had also reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. Moreover, Luo Ba was much more of a genius, his battle prowess almost reaching 19 stars. He was one of the 3 elites of the younger generation in the imperial capital. Of course, this young man had yet to reach the immortal level. Otherwise, no matter how monstrous a Shattering Void tier cultivator was, he wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure from a single gaze of a cultivator of the mountain river tier. This was the crushing pressure inflicted by immortals upon the mortals. Although Luo Lai wasn't as good as his older brother, he had also attained battle prowess of 17 stars and was full of himself. Therefore, when he was incited by Li Weiwei earlier, he quickly ran over and wanted to give Ling Han a good beating in order to please Li Weiwei. You have offended our 4th young, Mississippi. Why aren't you kneeling down to apologize? Luo Lai said proudly. He was self-absorbed with his own status. According to Li Weiwei, the other party had come from a small world. He naturally wasn't willing to exchange blows with Ling Han, considering this to be an insult to himself. Is he worthy? A lowly commoner from a small world. Li Weiwei immediately became dissatisfied. What she wanted wasn't for Ling Han to kneel down and apologize to her, but for Ling Han to be defeated. These two were completely different notions. Altogether, could Luo Lai compare to her when it came to powerful influence? In this case, she wouldn't have to pull the other party all the way here. Ling Han gave a faint smile, thinking to himself, whether it is a small world or the immortal realm, people are actually all the same, the only difference being that people of the immortal realm are a little bit more powerful. However, the juniors of influential officials will inevitably be full of arrogance and order other people around. This was a disease which should be treated. I don't have a habit of kneeling down to others. Why don't you give me a demonstration? Ling Han replied, not giving any face to the other party or Li Weiwei. He had already seen through it. This kind of crafty and unruly young lady couldn't be spoiled. The more she was spoiled, the more she would become stubborn and unreasonable. Luo Lai's expression immediately darkened. He said, a lowly commoner of the small world actually dares to talk back to me? Do you know what my Luo clan represents? It was a title of nobility granted by the Empress herself, inherited from generation to generation. Ling Han's expression immediately turned dark as he said, you keep on saying lowly commoner, but that won't highlight your nobility. Apologize to me. Otherwise I will beat you up until you beg for mercy. Ha 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 ha. Luo Li roared with laughter as he held his belly, saying, I could laugh myself to death. You, a lowly commoner of a small world, actually dared to ask me to apologize to you? Are you worthy? Are you worthy? Are you worthy? He repeated thrice, are you worthy? An assertion of his contempt towards Ling Han. Ling Han said coldly, this is the left minister's residence. I live here as a guest of the left minister. You came here to the left minister's residence to humiliate his guest. You are disrespecting the left minister. Fuck. Luo Lai was stunned, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. You really know how to pin the blame on someone else. I've only just called you a lowly commoner, and this is a fact. How did this relate to disrespecting the left minister? These words couldn't be taken to be true. Otherwise, he would be punished even if he was a descendant of the Luo clan. Contempt against the left minister was a serious crime. You are talking rubbish. He gasped. In this case, then you had better kneel down. Ling Han suddenly raised his voice. Luo Lai was genuinely stunned by Ling Han's roar and almost went down on his knees. Fortunately, he abruptly recovered and stopped himself in time. Fuck him. Aren't these two different matters altogether? Why should I kneel? Luo Lai came to his own realization. Why should he go along with Ling Han's reasoning? His breathing quickened, and his eyes were about to spit fire. The young master of the Luo clan was actually led around by the nose by a lowly commoner from a small world. He took out a sword from a spatial spirit tool, puffed up his chest, and said, "Congratulations, you have successfully irritated me. I will teach you a good lesson and let you know that this is not a small world. With just your little bit of strength, you only deserve to be a bastard with your tail tucked in between your legs." Li Weiwei was also quite annoyed. I asked you to come and fight. What are you rambling on about? However, the two were finally getting into a fight, so she cast aside her annoyance. She did not tell Luo Lai that Ling Han came by splitting open the sky. She merely played down the details and just mentioned that Ling Han came from a small world. Otherwise, she was certain that Luo Lai wouldn't dare to fight with Ling Han. In her eyes, she had hoped that the one who had come to fight wasn't Luo Lai, but his older brother Luo Ba, one of the three elites of the younger generation in the imperial capital. It didn't matter. Once Luo Li was defeated, the Luo clan would be humiliated. Could Luo Ba sit still and do nothing? Based on this, it could be seen that Li Weiwei was actually quite adherent to customs. Otherwise, it would have been very easy for her to mess with someone of the shattering void tier. There was an abundance of masters in the left minister's residence, after all. However, it could also be seen that she was an extremely proud person and disdained the use of status to suppress Ling Han. One had to rise from where one had fallen. However, Luo Lai naturally had been deceived by her. Chapter 888, Convinced Through Virtue. Chapter 888, Convinced Through Virtue. Ling Han did not intend to let Luo Lai off. He was an emperor, after all, the supreme leader of a small world. After entering the immortal realm, he had been oppressed on the left and suppressed on the right. Even though he'd been psychologically prepared, it didn't mean that he had no temper. Now that Luo Lai had provoked him, he would just use him as a punching bag to vent his frustration. Give him a beating, no big deal. In any case, he was also a guest of the left minister and the sovereign of a small country. No matter how small the country was, it would still rank higher than the Luo clan in terms of protocol. Therefore, even if he were to cripple or kill Luo Lai, the Luo clan could only bitterly swallow this loss. Even if they wanted to take revenge against him, they wouldn't send out an elite of immortal level, and could only send out someone of the shattering void tier. After all, everyone had to be seen adhering to the rules of propriety in public. However, if it was to be a battle between two shattering void tier cultivators, then why should Ling Han be afraid of anyone? Or rather, who could actually rival Ling Han? Even if the other party could use the power of the nation, nothing would change. Within 3 moves, I will make you kneel down and concede defeat. Ling Han said indifferently, but this actually exuded his domineering side. Li Weiwei couldn't help feeling somewhat baffled. It was something that she hadn't been able to see before. This aloof man actually had such a spirited side. At that moment, she suddenly recalled that the person in question had come by splitting open the sky. She still had no idea, that at the time when Ling Han was splitting open the sky, He had been attacked by immortals. Otherwise, she would have been more shocked and even come to idolize him. I dare to ask the world, is there another who could do it? Luo Lai was mad with anger. You are just someone who came from a small world. Yet you dare to be so arrogant? Do you really think this is a small world? He charged forward in one big stride, brandishing his long sword to stab at Ling Han's left shoulder. He wanted to pierce through Ling Han in a single strike. Ling Han put one hand behind his back, then flicked his finger. With a ding, the sword immediately rebounded. Ah! Luo Lai screamed loudly as the flesh between his thumb and index finger suddenly split open, and blood spurted from the wound. Pa, 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 and the long sword actually broke apart into 7 pieces and fell to the ground. Li Weiwei became numb and speechless, her mouth wide agape. What level of strength is this? Luo Lai's battle prowess was 17 stars of shattering void tier. The younger generation of the entire imperial capital knew about this. Even if he didn't use his full strength, it ought to be at least 16 stars, just now Li Weiwei was naturally able to conclude this, as she had the battle prowess of 16 stars herself. The power of 16 stars was actually no match for Ling Han. What was even more frightening was the sword. That level 10 spirit tool was broken apart before it could even unleash its might. She slightly stuck out her tongue as she had just come to a realization that Ling Han had gone a lot easier on her when they were dueling. Speaking of which, it was quite peculiar. If Ling Han was stronger than her by only 1 star, or just by a little bit, the stifling pain in her chest wouldn't be easily relieved. But now that she had found out that his strength exceeded hers by so much more, she became convinced, and was even secretly a little grateful to Ling Han, who didn't let her lose too badly. It went without saying that a young woman's heart changed unpredictably and was impossible to fathom. Luo Lai looked at Ling Han aghast. His face was filled with shock. He even doubted if his older brother was capable of such strength. Wasn't Ling Han a lowly commoner of a small world? How could he be this strong? You still have 2 moves. Ling Han said calmly as he extended his right hand and pressed gently. Boom! How powerful was his current strength? 16 stars of shattering void tier. It had completely reached the level of destroying 10,000 techniques with just 1 application of strength. When the strength pressed down, it was powerful like a tall mountain, immediately causing Luo Lai to be so shaken that he prostrated himself on the ground. Luo Lai only felt that there was a towering mountain pressing onto his back. He couldn't move a finger at all. Even the bones in his body were being broken with crackling ka, 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 and cold sweat was streaming all over him. Unfortunately, although he was the junior of a high-ranking official, he did not have any official position and wasn't engraved onto the totem. Therefore, he wasn't able to call upon the power of the nation, and naturally had no possibility of turning the tables. A person must remain humble. Bear in mind that there will always be others who are better than yourself. Ling Han said in a calm and composed manner, I have always convinced others through my own strength. Do you admit defeat or not? Pooh! Li Weiwei suddenly burst into laughter. You are pressing down on Luo Lai with one hand, and he almost spat out his tongue. Then you even said you convince others through your own strength. How shameless! Hey, how come the same shameless man actually made her feel amused now? Luo Lai had only one thought, which was, a wise man knew not to fight when the odds were against him. He quickly said, I admit defeat. I admit defeat. His chest was about to be crushed. Ling Han shook his head and said, You replied so quickly. It's obvious that you didn't properly reflect upon your mistakes and lack sincerity. Li Weiwei finally couldn't stop herself from laughing out loud. She was also a weird person. What she hated the most was following the rules. After seeing this side of Ling Han, she immediately developed a favorable impression of him and became attracted to this fellow of similar mindset. Luo Lai spat out a mouthful of blood. He had come to exact retribution for Li Weiwei. But now that he had fallen into such a pathetic state, Li Weiwei neither asked to stop nor lent him a helping hand, and was instead laughing happily on the sidelines. What the fuck? I really admit defeat. He clenched his teeth. His tears came flowing down in disappointment. Since his childhood, when had he ever been so humiliated? Then I will spare you this one time. Ling Han retracted his hand, appearing indifferent. Luo Lai glanced at Li Weiwei, but he saw that the other party was not at all concerned with him. He couldn't help but clench his teeth and abruptly walked away. Having suffered such a great humiliation, he was also too embarrassed to entangle her again. Ha 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 ha. Li Weiwei was so ecstatic that she clapped her hands. However, after a fit of laughter, when she saw Ling Han had turned around and was about to return indoor, she couldn't help feeling annoyed. Taking large strides, she rushed past him and spread out both her arms to block Ling Han, asking, "Whatever, Han? Why don't you ask me why I am laughing so happily?" Although she hadn't reached 20 years of age, her body was very well developed. With this one action of spreading both her arms, the 2 mounds on her chest, plump and full of vitality, were bouncing up and down as if they were about to jump out. They stood erect, round and big. Ling Han readily accepted her point, asking, "Why?" "Haha." Li Weiwei was beyond proud when she said, "The imbecile earlier was such a nuisance. I have absolutely no interest in him, but he kept sticking to me all the time. Now that you have taught him a good lesson on my behalf, don't you think that I should be happy?" "Oh." Ling Han nodded. He walked around past her, intending to continue on his path. "Hey, hey, hey!" Li Weiwei quickly went to block him again, her towering chest almost touching Ling Han, but she did not notice it at all. "There's more. Although Luo Lai's strength isn't that powerful, he still has an older brother called Luo Ba is very strong indeed. Reportedly his battle prowess has almost reached 19 stars. You've hit his brother, so Luo Ba will definitely not let the matter drop. At that time, he will come to put you in your place. This strategy is called killing 2 birds with 1 stone. It serves to both ruthlessly humiliate that nuisance and teach you a good lesson. What do you say, aren't I a genius?" She lifted her chin proudly, her neck as beautiful as that of a swan's. Ling Han smiled lightly and said, "Amongst shattering void tier cultivators, I am invincible. It doesn't matter who comes." These words might make him sound like an arrogant prick, but coming from his mouth, it also exuded ultimate assertion. Li Weiwei could not help but stare blankly. Chapter 889, The Power of Regulation. Chapter 889, The Power of Regulation. After a moment of distraction, Li Weiwei swiftly halted Ling Han's movement again, saying, "Do you know why the enrollment test of the Scarlet Heaven Academy isn't based on battle prowess, but rather martial arts talent, the strength of one's spirit, and battle skills, these 3 areas?" "Oh, why?" Ling Han asked with a smile. Actually, he really didn't want to indulge in idle chit-chat with this crafty and unruly young lady. The Immortal Realms regulations were perfected had planned to spend the next 10 days to cultivate the power of regulation. Perhaps he couldn't even scratch the surface with 10 days of cultivation, but it was better than squandering the time away. Li Weiwei was quite vexed. Why is this guy always giving me the cold shoulder? He was like this in front of my father, and still the same now that we are alone. One should know that she was one of the 3 great beauties in the imperial capital, who knew how many young elites would want to be alone with her. This blockhead from a small world. There must be something wrong with his brain. That's why he doesn't know how to appreciate my beauty. No, he must be an ice block. That's right. Otherwise, why would he be called Ling Han One? She snorted and said, "Because if you remain in the shattering void tier longer, you can always improve your battle prowess slightly. But in this world, the most important thing is still advancing through the cultivation levels. Your martial arts talent and strength of spirit will determine the speed of your advancement through the cultivation levels in the immortal level, and battle skills will be the key to victory in a battle between those of the same level. It makes sense. Ling Han nodded. This was truly the case, so he certainly agreed. Li Weiwei had the urge to strangle Ling Han to death. I have said so much, and you merely responded with an "it makes sense" in a dismissive manner. She pouted and said, "Blockhead, I will be looking forward to seeing you being taught a good lesson. Also, after 10 days if I win, then you will have to kneel before me and concede defeat." Ling Han burst out laughing. How was it possible that he would lose? He nodded and said, "That's a promise. But what if I win?" "If you win?" "Pa, if you win, you win. Don't tell me that you even want me to proclaim defeat?" Li Weiwei initially wanted to add on some grand speech, but then she recalled the strength he exhibited earlier, and thus immediately changed her mind. "I am the daughter of the left minister, so I can be this willful. Infuriate you to death." Ling Han just smiled, and did not take this to heart. He bypassed Li Weiwei and walked into the house. Li Weiwei thought to stop him, but after some consideration, gave up on the idea. It would be better to wait for Luo Ba to challenge Ling Han. At most, it would only be 10 days she would have another match with Ling Han then. She didn't believe that she would lose to Ling Han in the areas of martial arts talent, strength of the spirit, and battle skills. As long as she won in one area, she could boast about a twinning in one area was still a win, right? As for the 2 areas that she lost, pa. If that blockhead dared to bring this up, she would have his head. Ling Han returned inside the courtyard and began practicing his cultivation in seclusion. Upon stepping into the flower blossom tier 2, he would be placed above the rest. It would only be 10 days away. He didn't want to stir up any trouble. The regulations of the immortal realm were complete, and just by looking at the limited destructive power of the shattering void tier, it could be deduced that the space in this realm was stable to a terrifying degree. In a sense, the immortal level was a process of comprehending the power of regulation. At different stages, comprehension of the power of regulation would be different, and the destructive power would also be different accordingly. Upon reaching the Genesis tier, just one thought could break limitless regulations and easily destroy a planet infinitely terrifying. However, whether it could be done just by attaining the minor accomplishment of the Genesis tier, or one ought to reach the level of perfection, no one knew. After all, Yi Shuang was merely in the Sun-Moon tier, while Changyan had only reached the Mountain River tier, so it would be impossible for them to know the different capabilities of the 4 minor layers within the Genesis tier. Ling Han closed his eyes, letting his spirit come in touch with this world, comprehending the power of regulation. A cultivator of the Shattering Void tier would have such preliminary qualification. Moreover, he had also refined a little demonic chi of the Azura Demon Emperor, and attained some power of regulation of the Netherworld. Although the powers of regulation of the 2 realms were completely different, at least they were on the same level. Inevitably, there ought to be some basis for reference. Suddenly, he was struck with an idea. What if I could master the power of regulation of the 2 realms, immortal realm and netherworld, at the same time? One hand is yin and the other hand is yang, like the opposing force between heaven and earth. Who could block a strike like this? But then he immediately shook his head. He hadn't any comprehension of the mortal realm's power of regulation. But what about the netherworld? He was only now passively mastering traces of it, and still very far from reaching the level of minor accomplishment. Unless there's a chance to go to the netherworld. This wasn't impossible. There were 2 weak spots in the barrier of the immortal realm. If the netherworld could storm in here, then the immortal realm could also charge out of there. This would require extremely powerful strength. It would be akin to suicide if I go over now. Besides, I haven't even grasped the power of regulation of the immortal realm. Why bother to think about the netherworld? He laughed in spite of himself, thinking that he was really too greedy. A period of 2 to 3 days passed by quietly. Unexpectedly, there was no movement in the Luo clan. Perhaps they knew that Ling Han would participate in the assessment of the Northern Institution and planned to settle the disagreement at that time. On the contrary, Li Weiwei seemed to be hooked onto Ling Han. She would come to make a fuss at least every alternate day, but would always leave in anger. She simply wouldn't learn her lesson and would come to be angered again the next day. 10 days passed by quickly. Ling Han stopped cultivating and opened up his right palm. There were traces of interweaving golden light on it. That was the power of regulation, but it was just too weak. Limited to the realm, whether it was the shattering void tier, mountain river tier, or other levels, there was a limit to the degree of comprehension of the power of regulation. Now, there was still a very huge gap between Ling Han's current level and the highest limit of the shattering void tier. If this limit was compared to 100, then he had not even reached 1 yet. I may appear to have reached the 9th layer of the shattering void tier, but there is still a lot of room for improvements truly unsuitable to charge towards immortal level. Just by surveying the immortal level, one could already tell which among those like Xiao Miaoyan and Wu Gaoyuan had not already reached the 9th layer of the shattering void tier. Their battle prowess had also reached 18 stars, but why didn't they charge towards the immortal level? It wasn't because they weren't able to, but rather because it wasn't the right time yet. Charging forward, then, would affect their battle prowess in the immortal level. Who didn't want to become a 1-star, 2-star, or even 3-star or 4-star genius, or even barely limited to the legendary 5-star genius? Blockhead! Blockhead! Li Weiwei rushed over energetically. The admission examination for the Northern Institution has begun. Quickly, quickly! I must defeat you today and make you admit defeat. Ling Han gave a wry smile and said, "Okay, lead the way." Li Weiwei immediately rolled her eyes and said, "Why should I lead the way? Do you take me as your servant?" "I do not know the way," Ling Han replied. Li Weiwei couldn't help but be speechless. This reason was absolutely valid, so she had no basis for a rebuttal. She clenched her teeth in spite how was it that this blockhead would always find a way to make her angry. She wasn't a narrow-minded person, but facing Ling Han would always give rise to a violent impulse in her. "Come with me." She led the way in front, but a moment later emphasized, "I am not leading the way for you. Rather, you are my follower. Understand?" Ling Han just chuckled lightly, causing Li Weiwei to almost go berserk. Chapter 890, Gathering of Geniuses. Chapter 890, Gathering of Geniuses. Although there wasn't any fanfare accompanying the left minister's 4th young miss when she went out, the moment when Ling Han and Li Weiwei stepped out the residence, for ordinary-looking men immediately followed behind them. They were the bodyguards whom the left minister had arranged, for Li Weiweichuan was an elite cultivator who had attained the level of perfection in the mountain river tier. Within the entire Chaotic Star's majestic empire, there was scarcely any person with the capability to make these elites their bodyguards. Given the strength of Ling Han and Li Weiwei, it was naturally impossible for them to realize that these 4 elites were following behind them. They were heading eastwards to the Scarlet Heaven Academy, which was situated on the east side of the imperial capital, close to the city gates. They took a ride on the left minister's carriage. On the way, pedestrians stepped aside to let them pass, and even soldiers patrolling the streets stopped to salute, paying their respects. It could be seen that the left minister had widespread, powerful influence. In a small world, the spirit tool for flying had only one purposito save the energy of the cultivator. Its actual speed wasn't faster than that of martial artists or even fast at all. But in the immortal realm, most of the vehicle's speed was faster than the cultivators themselves. Not to mention the god tool for flying. Only someone with the power or level of strength as high as the left ministers could possess one. Hence, despite the imperial capital being outrageously vast, they arrived at the north gate of the academy in about 2 hours. Although there was only one Scarlet Heaven Academy, it was made up of 4 institutions, which had their own respective entrances. For example, the Northern institution would use the North Gate. Generally, students from the respective institutions wouldn't visit other institutions. The competition amongst the 4 institutions was extremely fierce. If a student from the Northern institution was to trespass into the territory of the Eastern institution, he would definitely be given a good thrashing. At this moment, there was a lot of people already waiting at the gate. Although the Scarlet Heaven Academy would recruit students every 5 years, this majestic empire was truly massive. Every time, only a handful out of thousands would get accepted as students. The elimination rate was astonishing. Therefore, the first stage was naturally filtering the people. Those who appeared to have too poor an aptitude would be eliminated immediately so as not to waste time. The symbol of the left minister was really useful. Although the carriage itself could not go inside the academy, they were able to cut the queue and cross through the masses of people as vast as the ocean. They didn't have to waste the slightest bit of time in entering the academy grounds. Why are they allowed to cut the queue? That's right, we have all waited for several hours. Completely unfair. At this time, many young candidates raised their voices incessantly in anger, full of vigor. A guard at the academy sneered coldly and said, "If your father is the left minister, then naturally you can also jump the queue." Once the sentence had been said, everyone became silent. Left minister! How powerful a figure was he? The 4 bodyguards from the left minister's residence did not enter the academy, but dispersed, leaving only one person to keep watch near one entrance of the academy, lest the naughty 4th young miss sneaked out. She had a history of committing such acts. After the 2 entered the academy's grounds, Li Weiwei was still leading the way. It was obviously not her first time here, as she navigated her way with ease. After a while of walking, she brought Ling Han to a public square. This was actually the center of the Scarlet Heaven Academy, wherein a white tower with 9 floors stood. A 9-story tower again. Humph! Small tower grumbled in a dissatisfied tone. How dares it imitate me? Destroy it! Ling Han couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He said, "Although it is also a 9-story tower, but it's white in color, which is very different from you. In any case, I don't like the sight of it. Destroy it." Small tower was obviously extremely tsundra. Don't mess around. This is the place that the Scarlet Heaven Academy will use for the assessment. If you want me to go destroy it, putting aside the question of whether I have such ability or not, even if I can, how many pieces do you think I will be chopped into? Ling Han said with a smile. The assessment of the Scarlet Heaven Academy was actually quite simple. One would enter the tower, and those who could climb to the 3rd floor would pass the assessment and be accepted as students of the academy. Naturally, the higher one could climb, the better the score would be. The top 10 students would receive focused training by the academy, especially the top 3, whose rewards would be a lot more. Can you guess who will get first place this time? It goes without saying that it must be Luo Ba. Not only is he one of the 3 elites of the younger generation in the imperial capital, he also has the most outstanding talent. I'm optimistic that he can get the first place this time. Hee, you already said that there are 3 elites. Have you forgotten about Ji Yinner and Lin Yu? Yes, I am more optimistic about Ji Yinner. Just her being one of the 3 great beauties in the imperial capital is enough for me to support her. I am more optimistic about Lin Yu. Big Brother Lin is a loyal friend, even willing to sacrifice himself. There was a lot of ongoing discussions. Despite there being different views, everyone had no doubt that Luo Ba, Lin Yu, and Ji Yinner would most likely advance and break through amidst the fierce competition. At the very least, the top 3 spots would definitely be occupied by them, the only suspense being who would get first place. You people are really too narrow-sighted. Are there no geniuses outside of the imperial capital? Some people argued, unconvinced. Ha 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 ha. This triggered hoots of laughter from the crowd. You are really naive. Do you know what kind of place the imperial capital is? The best of the empire are converging here. Forget the others, and just refer to elites of the heavenly body tier. Where else can you find these elites other than in the imperial capital? They are all similarly nurturing their juniors. Do you think that those of the heavenly body tier would lose to others at the sun, moon, or mountain river tier? In martial arts, a difference in level by a minor layer is the gap between heaven and earth. The amount of resources possessed by the clans in the imperial capital is beyond your imagination. Although talent is important, there are many treasures in the world that can improve one's physique and battle prowess. No matter how you put it, one's background is the most important. Aha! Everyone nodded and agreed on this point. Talent could make up for background to a certain extent, but the problem was that those people with a background would also have talent. How could one compare? It would be futile to put in tremendous effort while other people also work hard. Observing the scene from one corner of the square, an elderly man in gray robes, who had his arms crossed behind him, said softly, "Everyone thinks that the trio of Luo, Lin, and Ji can get the first place in this assessment. Haofei, do you have the confidence to defeat these three people?" "Please be assured, great-grandfather, I have been working hard for more than 10 years, bearing with loneliness and austerity. Wasn't all of that for today to shock the world with an amazing feat?" Beside the old man was a young man who appeared to be no more than 20 years old, with a cultivation of the 9th layer of the shattering void tier. "Ha! Then great-grandfather shall be waiting to see you shine." The gray-robed old man laughed heartily. Logically, parents weren't allowed to enter the academy's grounds, but this didn't prevent some with certain privileges. For example, if the left minister wished to enter the academy, who would dare to stop him? However, the higher their position, the more they would pay attention to this aspect, and not easily give their political opponents a point that could be used to attack themselves. Therefore, few of them actually appeared. The young man clenched his fists and said, "Just you wait, today will be my day. Everyone can only look up to me. Cheng Haofei from beneath my feet." Oh. In another corner, a young man with bare arms was concentrating on wiping a long saber. His eyes were extremely focused. Occasionally, when he raised his head, his gaze sweeping across the square would make others nearby go soft in the knees. One should know that all the others were similarly cultivators of the shattering void tier, having the ability to make others cower with just a glance. How strong was this person? "The first place shall belong to me, Ma Xing." Chapter 891, A Very Slight Effort. Chapter 891, A Very Slight Effort. "Let's begin," an important person of the academy said. There were bright images of a sun and moon behind him, which meant that he was a powerful elite of the sun-moon tier, though he was only in the minor levels. This kind of elite was more than enough to gain the admiration of others. After entering into a mortal level, every minor level was akin to tall mountain that people would exclaim at, and there were pitifully few that could conquer one mountain after another. The minor level of the sun-moon tier could be considered standing on the 5th tall peak, and this was an extremely tall peak. Climbing the previous 4 mountains could still be considered easy, but if one wanted to conquer this one, it was as difficult as touching the sky itself. Everyone held their breath, not even daring to breathe too loudly. Even if many here had come from prominent background, respect for strength was basic manners, and only spoiled young masters would behave arrogantly, knowing they had the support of their clan and background. The White Star Tower can accommodate 10,000 people at once. Line up and enter in turn. Once full, the tool spirit will naturally stop others from entering, this important person said. "Make the most of your time and try to complete the assessment by today, everyone." Yes, everyone could not help but nod. Influenced by the aura of an elite, their emotions were uncontrollably affected as well. Everyone arranged themselves into lines and entered one by one that 9-storied white tower. It was obviously a treasured spirit tool that possessed an independent space. Otherwise, it was definitely impossible that 10,000 people could enter at the same time to undergo the assessment. However, this test was conducted really quickly, without waiting for all 10,000 people to enter. There were people coming out already. The pace of exchange had even caught up to the speed of people entering into the tower. Every time someone passed through the test on each floor, this treasured tower would correspondingly make that floor light up. The results would be recorded by the tool, spirit no one could cheat. If anyone really wanted to fool this god tool, that was actually more difficult than passing through this 9-storied tower. Those that were determined to aim for good results all tacitly stayed at the back, wanting to appear on stage as the climax. Blockhead Luo Ba is right over there. Go and greet him. Li Weiwei urged. Is it really all right for you to act like that? Ling Han shook his head and chucked in spite of himself. This willful and unruly young miss was really bearing a grudge against him, tirelessly wanting him to be defeated. He was naturally not going to go over, but the Luo brothers had also spotted him. Luo Lai immediately looked furious and spoke a few words lowly to the ear of a young man beside him. The two of them then walked over. The other person was naturally Luo Ba. Now, this person did not just have an empty reputation. His body was as tall and sturdy like a tyrannical king's, and his aura was even more incredible. There were halos of divine light flickering around him as if he was the son of a god. Greetings, fourth young miss! The Luo brothers paid their respects to Li Weiwei simultaneously. Li Weiwei nodded back in an aloof manner. She was the daughter of the left minister, and the descendants of noble background in the imperial capital that could stand equal with her could be counted on one hand. Luo Ba then turned to look at Ling Han and said calmly, This must be Brother Ling who has come from a small world, right? I am Ling Han, Ling Han replied, similarly very calm. Thank you for your guidance of my younger brother. Luo Ba said darkly, flames of rage jumping in his eyes. Although the Luo clan was not in the top tier of noble clans in the imperial capital, they were not in existence that could be humiliated by the likes of a lowly commoner from a small world, either. Ling Han chuckled and replied, It was only a very slight effort, don't mention it. Fuck! The Luo brothers were both thrown into a towering rage. They were absolutely not thanking him, all right? Luo Ba was obviously making an ironic remark, and you actually took it seriously. Luo Ba could not help but humph and said, No one can humiliate members of my Luo clan. At first, he had wanted to beat down on Ling Han verbally, but he'd never imagined that Ling Han was not the type to react as expected, causing the strike that he delivered to have no effect at all. On the contrary, it was him who felt very displeased. Hence, he directly revealed his violent nature. Oh, you want to fight? Ling Han asked, smiling. In the shattering void tier, there was really no one he was afraid of, not even the Empress of Chaotic Star's majestic empire. Let's see if he wouldn't thrash her to the point of submitting and calling him Big Brother if she suppressed her cultivation level to the shattering void tier. Fight, fight! Li Weiwei, meanwhile, immediately began to wave her small fists around, wishing for the whole world to be in chaos. Luo Ba sneered coldly and said, You are really quite crafty. This is the Scarlet Heaven Academy. Who would dare to be impudent here? However, even if you enter into the academy, I will still challenge you, and if you are unable to enroll into the academy, then you're dead. Ling Han rubbed his chin with a smile and said, Is it really all right for you to threaten me like this? Aren't you afraid that you are not my match, and instead will be beaten into begging for mercy from me? Haha. Luo Ba laughed coldly. What a joke! He was one of the well-known figures among the younger generation of the Luo clan, and had extremely high expectations placed on him. How could he possibly be defeated by a lowly commoner from a small world? If it were not for the fact that he wanted to attempt to reach the highest battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier, with the resources of the Luo clan, he would have long since been able to advance into the immortal level. But for a brighter future, He would not attempt to break through into the mortal level before he reached 100 years of age unless he could reach 20 stars of battle prowess first. That was a very common understanding. Everyone would attempt to reach the highest limit of battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier before they were 100 years old. They were still young anyways. And if they broke through after reaching 20 stars of shattering void tier, they would be able to become a 1-star genius and possess the super battle prowess that could allow them to cross over a sub-minor level in battle to fight a stronger opponent. "You just wait and see," he said word by word. "Do you have a stutter?" Ling Han said, making a pretense of being worried. "How pitiful. The younger brother is an idiot, and the elder brother is a stutter, sigh." The Luo brothers were both enraged and felt an uncontrollable urge to rush over and make a move on Ling Han. They just barely managed to control this urge. If they rashly made a move in the academy, especially on such an important day like today, then it would be useless even if they had the backing of the Luo clan. The result would be a definite expulsion from the academy and them being eternally banned from entering it again. "Let's go. We're going in to take the assessment." Luo Ba held onto his brother so that the latter would not rashly make a move and in the end cause himself great trouble. Power was the rule here. He wanted to climb to the 5th floor of the tall tower and make everyone know that he, Luo Ba, was the only ruler of the younger generation. After a while, the 4th level lit up. If they could advance one more step and reach the 5th level, they would have hopes of becoming a 1-star genius. Is there something like that? Of course. What do you think this assessment is for? This is a test of your future potential. The 5th level means you can become a 1-star genius. The 6th floor means 2-star. The 7th level means 3-star. The 8th means 4-star. And the 9th level, 5-star. Of course, this is only potential and not definite. It will still depend on your own individual effort. Thus, those that had not passed the assessment previously can also come back to participate as long as they are no older than 100 years. After all, your hard work can produce a change in yourself. Furthermore, it is also possible that you encounter some kind of fateful opportunity to, letting you pass next time. I see. The rookies all nodded and looked at that 9-storied white tower simultaneously. Although the 3rd level would light up occasionally, it was the first time for the 4th level to light up. Who is that fierce? Who else? Didn't you all see Luo Ba go in? Hiss, so it was him. No wonder he could pass the 4th level. I don't know if he will be able to make the 5th level light up as well. That's a bit difficult, but it is not impossible. Just as the spectators were talking, the 5th floor of the tower lit up. All of a sudden, a stir was created among the crowd. Chapter 892, 5th Level Genius. Chapter 892, 5th Level Genius. 5th Level. As expected of Luo Ba, someone who is highly likely to become a 1-star genius. A genius difficult to encounter even in 100 years. Everyone exclaimed in shock, their admiration and envy clear in their words and expressions. This was the best result so far. Hey, do you think that Luo Ba has a chance of advancing further, passing through the 6th level and becoming a 2-star genius? It'd be difficult. The gap between 1-star and 2-star genius is the gap of a sub-minor level, and apparently this kind of genius would only appear once every 1,000 years. It's hard to say. After all, we are the chaotic star's majestic empire. Our territory is too vast, and the number of geniuses that appear is naturally much, much higher. In other royal empires, there may appear a few 1-star geniuses in one go, but for us, there can possibly appear a 2-star genius. Though that's true, it is still more difficult for a 2-star genius to appear. As far as I know, presently, there is less than 100 2-star geniuses in the whole Scarlet Heaven Academy, right? Even though this figure looked very big, what kind of entity was the whole of the Scarlet Heaven Academy? It was a place that had brought together all the geniuses of the whole chaotic star's majestic empire in the several thousand years past and present. Going by such calculations, 100 was really actually not that many. Let's see. Everyone was staring at the 9-storied white tower. If the 6th level of the tower also lit up, it meant that Luo Ba might become a 2-star genius in future. But after a long time, the 6th level still did not light up, and Luo Ba had already walked out of the tower. He had not been able to pass through the 6th level. This caused the higher-ups of the academy to feel slightly regretful. At first, they had looked very optimistically on this young man, but Luo Ba was ultimately unable to perform a miracle. But this was normal. 2-star geniuses were really much too rare. Even with the environment that was the chaotic star's majestic empire, at most only one had appeared in this decade. Furthermore, it was not impossible for Luo Ba to advance further in the future and become a 2-star genius. Of course, it was also possible that he might not even reach the level of a 1-star genius. This assessment was only a test of potential after all. Very good, very good. I asked Lord Tool Spirit just now. Though Luo Ba couldn't pass through the 6th level, he has still completed the tests on the first 2 stages of the 6th floor. This result is extremely good, and in previous years he would have been able to rank in the top 3. Even if he got the 1st place, it would not be strange. Ho, we finally got a good sprout. Several elites of the Northern Institution spoke amongst themselves. They could finally breathe in relief. Obviously, the more talented and excellent the students they enrolled were, the more they could hold their heads high in the institution. With how dazzling the spotlight was on Luo Ba now, it made the other geniuses restless. They all entered into the tower to undergo the assessment in turns, and all of a sudden there were considerably many more people coming out of the 4th floor. But Luo Ba was still the only one who could pass through to the 5th level. Blockhead, are you feeling the pressure yet? Li Weiwei elbowed Ling Han and said, as expected of a genius that can stand on the same level as Big Sister Yin. He actually managed to pass through the 5th level. Sigh, I can only pass through to the 4th level at most. Her expression was filled with disappointment, although she had long since known that she was not as talented as the top-tier geniuses. She still felt down now that things had come to a head. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, then just wait and see how I will sweep aside all geniuses and proudly claim the 1st place. Show off! Li Weiwei rolled her eyes exaggeratedly and said, I'll go first. However, since you speak so confidently, then you'll be the last to go on stage. Let me see how you amaze everyone, all right? Fine. Ling Han nodded. Looking at this rate, the assessment could definitely be completed today. Then it was going to be a wait in any case, so there was no difference between going in earlier or later. Li Weiwei ran into the tower and spent about 30 minutes' time before she finally completed her assessment. The longer one took, the better the results should be. Indeed, she had passed the 4th level, but lost on the tactic stage of the 5th level. There was nothing to be done about it. Spirit and even talent itself could be boosted with treasures, but combat tactics required understanding through personal experience. Look, the 5th level has lit up again. Exclamations rang out. Everyone raised their heads and saw that the 5th level had indeed lit up. A sliver of darkness instantly appeared on Luo Ba's face. A person that had passed through the 5th level could possibly become a threat to him, which made him feel much pressure. Brother, don't worry. You have passed the first 2 stages. As long as this person can't pass through the 6th level, then he would only be on the same level as you at most. Moreover, in my opinion, it is extremely likely for that person to be disqualified in the first 2 stages ahead, Luo Lai said. Luo Ba nodded slowly. He was very confident in himself, but still fixed his eyes on the entrance of the 9-storied tower, hoping that he could see that person exit quickly. The earlier he came out, the faster it implied he had been disqualified, and naturally the smaller the possibility he had of passing through the first 2 stages ahead. Quite some time had passed, yet the 6th level ultimately still did not light up. A tall young man walked out, slovenly in dress and manner, unrestrained and careless. So it turned out to be Brother Lin Yu. No wonder he could pass through the 5th level. Who knows how he compares against Luo Ba? Humph! Brother Lin would definitely not be worse off than Luo Ba. Many spoke up. They were very much convinced of this Lin Yu's ability, and every one of them gave off a feeling cordial familiarity. Everyone knew that Lin Yu was loyal, and as long as you managed to get his approval, then he would think of a way to help you, no matter how big the problem you encountered was. In the young generation of the imperial capital, who would not give a big thumbs up and call out Brother Lin when they spoke of Lin Yu. Thus, when they compared Lin Yu and Luo Ba together, it became very obvious whom everyone was supportive of. It definitely had to be Lin Yu. Luo Ba could not help but humph, his expression even darker. Although he clearly knew that Lin Yu's results were the same as his at most, he still felt very displeased. Here's another 5-story genius. Unfortunately, he has similarly fallen at the 3rd stage of the 6th level, if not Sai. The elites of the Northern Institution all felt very pleased, but slightly regretful as well. After all, Lin Yu had just been a bit away from passing the 6th level. In the crowd, that young man with bare forearms jumped down from a huge rock. Showing a smile of confidence, he strode towards the 9-storied tower. He was really forceful, and as he walked, the people in his surroundings would all give away. Some had even flopped down to sit on the ground as if they were mortals that had come up against a fierce beast, so terrified that their hair stood on ends. Who's this person? What a frightening aura. I know he's an amazing genius from the wild mountains in the south. He just arrived in the imperial capital a few days ago. He fought a successive 13 battles in the ranking battles of the battle arena, gaining a successive 13 victories. What? He actually managed to win 13 successive matches in the battle arena. Then he would at least be able to become a 1-star genius in future, right? And according to the rules of the ranking battles in the battle arena, winning 10 matches consecutively is the standard of a 1-star genius. Then had he lost in the 14th match? No, he just did not choose to continue fighting. Why? He said he was hungry and didn't want to fight anymore. Pooh! Once these words were heard, it instantly caused a great many to choke with laughter. His reason was actually that, was this guy a glutton? He really proved himself as one who had come out of the wild mountains. However, this guy's aura is really quite scary. Even if I am the same as him in ability, merely standing in front of him to battle, I would only be able to exhibit 10% of my battle prowess at most. Not fighting, yet he can scare off enemy troops. This is the appearance of a natural ruler. After laughing, everyone's expressions became serious. This person was very frightening. What's his name? Ma Xing. Chapter 893, The King Ma Xing. Chapter 893, The King Ma Xing. As Ma Xing passed, everyone gave way. Only a few could stand up to the pressure he exuded. Even the elites of the academy nodded in approval. This young man strode boldly forward. He had the appearance of a king. In the immortal realm, the so-called kings were not those human cultivators that had formed qi, but those formidable characters that possessed outstanding presence. Otherwise, wouldn't everyone be able to become a king and cause the word king to become much too cheap? Yet, this Ma Xing completely deserved the name of king. Without battling, his presence was enough to subdue enemy troops. His was really a figure that would be rare even in 100,000 years. I never thought that our institution actually managed to receive this kind of student. And ever since Hai Feng left the Northern Institution, we have never had this kind of king-tier student anymore. There has been a lapse of over 1,000 years. On the other hand, the Eastern, Southern, and Western institutions, respectively, have received a king-tier student in these few hundred years and have left us far behind. Even if this kid can't pass through the White Star Tower's test, I will still take him as my personal disciple. Ho ho! How could a king-tier student possibly be unable to pass through the first 3 levels of assessments? Old Jew, you are bearing malicious intentions, wanting to snatch this king-tier student for yourself. Fuck, am I that kind of person? You obviously are. When the exchange between these elites was heard by the people nearby and the news was spread out, a stir was created in the crowd. A king-tier student. This was too shocking. Even with how big the territory of the chaotic star's majestic empire was, this kind of talent would probably appear only once every 100 years. It was extremely rare and comparable to a 3-star genius. Ma Xing entered into the 9-storied tower. Very quickly, the 3rd level lit up. There were very many people who could pass through the first 2 levels, and it had practically ensured that the first 2 levels were constantly lit. But the 3rd level was a different story. It would only flicker occasionally. But after only a while, the 4th level lit up as well. Would he be able to reach the 5th level? Everyone felt curious. The aura of a king was not among the assessment criteria of the White Star Tower, so it could not possibly gain him extra credit. Thus, whether or not you were a king had absolutely no effect on the question of whether you could pass through the White Star Tower. If Ma Xing could pass through the 5th level with his own individual ability, then added with his king's chi, he would be able to reach the battle prowess of a 2-star genius, and in the future he might even still have room for improvement and reach the level of a 3-star or even 4-star genius. Do you all know that the left and right ministers, as well as the 7 generals of our empire, all possess king's chi, and they themselves are 4-star geniuses? What? Everyone was astonished by this explosive revelation and grabbed their heads, exclaiming their shock. What, is it real? Then wouldn't that be comparable to 5-star geniuses? A super existence that only exists in legends. Naturally, do you know how many millennia those elites have cultivated for? Your clan's ancestor hadn't even been born, and these few have already begun cultivating. Apparently, the youngest, Lord Left Minister, is already 80 million years old this year. Over 80 million years old? Are you sure you did not speak wrongly? It is not 80,000 years or 800,000 years old. Of course, in the past, which among the left and right ministers and the 7 generals was not a forceful ruler of a region. It was only when Her Majesty, the Empress, appeared out of nowhere and swept aside all opposition in the world with her invincibility that the lords were all gathered under her banner. Say, how many star genius is Her Majesty the Empress, then? I don't know. There has never been anyone who has seen Her Majesty move, because there is absolutely no need for that. That's right. Her Majesty is the greatest beauty in the world. Who would be so cruel to make a move on her the moment they saw her? Shoot, don't speak rashly, or you may lose your head at any moment. To dare to disrespect the Empress, are you tired of living? I was just complimenting Her Majesty. Just at this moment, the 5th level of the White Star Tower lit up. All of a sudden, a stir was created among the crowd. The 5th level meant that he had the potential of a 1-star genius, and added with a solid king's might, Ma Xing was practically sure to become a 2-star genius in future. Ha 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 ha. The elites of the Northern Institution were all laughing very delightedly, feeling that they had finally gotten a hold of a treasure this time round. This was a definite piece of excellent jade, and with careful carving, it was possible for him to even become a 3-star or 4-star genius. Meanwhile, Luo Ba's expression darkened. Even if Ma Xing failed immediately, the concentrated attention that the other would receive in the academy would definitely exceed his. This made him feel as if he had been slapped. In another corner, an old man said, "Haofei, you've encountered a rival." Cheng Haofei stared at the 9-storied tower and said, "Great-grandfather, I have the confidence to pass through the 6th level. If you can become a 2-star genius, then you would not be weaker than him." The old man's attention focused. "Do you have the confidence?" "Full confidence." Cheng Haofei gripped his fists. He had worked hard at cultivation for more than 10 years. Wasn't it all for him to amaze everyone with a single feat on this day and shock everyone? On another side, Li Weiwei was also looking very astonished. She then tossed a disdainful glance at Ling Han as she said, "Blockhead, now do you still dare to be confident?" "Why would I not dare?" Ling Han asked, smiling. "He is a one-star genius and has King's Qi as well, so he would at least become a two-star genius." Li Weiwei looked at him as if she was staring at an idiot. Yet Ling Han crossed his arms behind his back and said, "I have said so before. I am invincible, and it applies to everyone." Ayaya, how could this guy be so puffed up? He was obviously a country bumpkin that had just come from a small world. So why was his confidence level so sky-high? Li Weiwei felt as if she was about to be driven mad. But looking at how self-confident Ling Han looked, she could not help but become a bit absent-minded. She had to admit that when men showed off this kind of invincible presence, it was still extremely attractive for women. Pay. I was not moved in the slightest. He is nothing but an idiot." Li Weiwei quickly spat, and threw that little bit of fluster that had just arisen out of her thoughts. Just at this moment, gasps of shock rang out. The 6th level lit up as well. Heavens! He himself is a 2-star genius, and added with his King's Qi, Ma Xing is comparable to a 3-star genius. He is definitely the most outstanding student in the last 100 years. No. There are not that few 2-star geniuses, but added with his King's Qi and limited to the Northern Institution. It would be difficult to meet one such as he in 1,000 years. Everyone exploded from surprise. They had witnessed the birth of a king. Luo Ba's fists cracked from clenching them too tightly. Ma Xing's strength and talent caused endless killing intent to arise with him. If he killed the other, then he would still be the first place. Chang Haofei similarly felt as if he had been dealt a heavy blow. He had been confident he could pass through the 6th level of the White Star Tower, but that would only be the same as the other party. If one added in King's Qi, he was far too inferior. Thankfully, Ma Xing did not continue to shock others, and very quickly came out of the tower. He had failed on the 2nd stage of the 7th level. This result, once again, caused a stir. The elites of the Northern Institution had practically confirmed that Ma Xing was going to hold the first place in the assessment this time, and fought to extend an olive branch to him, wanting to take him in as their personal disciple. Ma Xing did not accept, appearing to be extremely proud and aloof. Yet this made the elites even more pleased with him. What future elite would not be arrogant and obstinate in nature? Without a little temper, would you have the nerve to call yourself an elite? "Should be about time I should go in as well," Ling Han said. Chapter 894, Entering the Tower. Chapter 894, Entering the Tower. After Ma Xing came out, those that had not yet undergone the assessment became gradually fewer and fewer. Those that did not pass were directly sent out of the academy, and those that had passed stood on another side of the square. Together, there were only over 300 of them, and compared to the number that had come to register for the enrollment, this number was pitifully small. There were about 1,000 people that had yet to take the assessment, and standing in the massive square, they seemed odd. Li Weiwei's status was special, which was why she managed to come back after taking the assessment. She heard Ling Han was about to take the assessment and could not help but become excited. She said, Go on, I can no longer wait to humiliate you." "You will not have that opportunity." Ling Han smiled, appearing to be very confident. "Tisk!" Li Weiwei scoffed. This guy had just ascended from a small world, so he could not have come into contact with the White Star Tower before, and thus absolutely would not know what the assessment inside the tower was like. Where had he gotten such overwhelming confidence from? Big Sister Yin. Her eyes were sharp, and she spotted a young woman that had just arrived in the square. She immediately raced over. This woman was dressed in a long snow-white skirt, and aside from a hairpin, there was no other adornment on her. This gave her a kind of natural beauty, unearthly and elegant, like a fairy that was above the common populace. Wearing any additional ornaments was unnecessary and would only damage her quiet and exquisite presence. She was Ji Yun'er, one of the 3 great beauties of the imperial capital, and was also one of the 3 great elites of the younger generation. She had enough admirers to line up around the colossal imperial capital 3 times. Although she did not have as strong a background as Li Weiwei's, her suitors definitely were not few. Ji Yun nodded and asked, "Weiwei, have you passed the assessment?" N. Li Weiwei nodded. "Big Sister Yin, why are you so late? I thought you had changed your mind and planned to wait another 5 years to take the assessment for the Eastern institution." Ji Yun'er's slender brows wrinkled unwittingly, but they immediately smoothened out, and she said, "I already agreed to take the assessment with you. So how could I possibly break my word? All right, let's not talk now. I'm going to take the assessment." "Okay." Li Weiwei suddenly waved her hand and declared loudly, "Big Sister Yin, go on. You definitely have to beat that show-off of a blockhead." Ji Yun'er naturally did not know who this blockhead was. She walked elegantly and naturally towards the White Star Tower as if she was a cloud, unmarred by dirt, touching and graceful, causing many who saw her to turn heated gazes on her. Ma Xing's eyes lit up as well, and he revealed an interested expression. The corners of his mouth lifted up slightly, with a slight demonic feel to it. In the corner, Cheng Haofei was also walking towards the White Star Tower. It was about time. If he still did not move, then that was not showing off anymore. Rather, he would miss the assessment this time entirely. This was the last batch and at the same time also the highest quality batch. The 3rd level lit up repeatedly, and even the 4th level would light up every now and then, abruptly increasing the number of those who had passed the assessment by another 100 and more. However, the 5th level adamantly did not light up. Ling Han walked into the tower, and everyone beside him immediately disappeared. He no longer heard any background noise, either. He had entered into an independent space. Ahead of him, a stone chamber suddenly appeared. There was only a simple stone table, and a jade plaque lay on the table. The 1st level, the 1st stage, a test of comprehension. A voice rang out, so cold that there was not a hint of emotion in it. The tool spirit of the White Star Tower. A god tool was a god tool, after all. Aside from Small Tower, Ling Han had never heard another tool spirit speak. "Che, the lowest grade god tool, not even fit to pick up my shoes," Small Tower declared in a very tsundere manner. Ling Han paid it no attention and asked, "How will we be tested?" "There is a section of a cultivation technique etched on that jade plaque. You have to decode it in 30 minutes' time to pass the test, and the shorter the time you take, the better your result," the tool spirit answered coldly. In this god tool, it could split itself into millions, and it would be easy for it to communicate with over 10,000 people at the same time. Ling Han could not help his curiosity and questioned, "Is there a record to be broken? And will there be any reward for breaking the record?" "There is a record to be broken, but there is no reward. Your name will only be etched here," the tool spirit replied. "There are 10 names etched on the wall in front of you, and they are the 10 people who have taken the shortest amount of time. If someone afterward surpasses their record, a name will be replaced." Ling Han shook his head. Then there was no point to break the record. "You may begin," the tool spirit said calmly. If this had been an immortal level elite, he would have long lost patience with Ling Han's incessant questions and want to beat someone up, but it merely followed a predefined pattern and did not experience the slightest rise or fall of emotion. Only now did Ling Han walk towards the stone table and sit on the ground. He picked up the jade plaque and inserted his divine sense within. Instantly, multiple ancient letters popped out and churned around in his mind's eye. This kind of inherited cultivation technique would enter directly into the mind and could not be described in written word or spoken speech. Only when one really comprehended it would he be able to give a rough description of it. Take note, it was only a rough description, and not the cultivation technique itself. A cultivation technique was a serious business, and there was no room for the slightest error. Ling Han closed his eyes slightly and placed the jade plaque down as he said, "This is a claw technique, but it is badly damaged. There are only 2.5 moves left, and there isn't a complete set of route map for the movement of origin power either. With regards to moves, it should be like this." He gestured a few times, showing off the 2.5 moves of the claw technique. Because it did not involve any use of origin power, it was naturally without difficulty. The tool spirit paused, then said, "Though this martial arts technique is very low grade, your comprehension level is very high. You may be ranked in the 13th place, but cannot leave your name. HM." At first, Ling Han was completely uninterested in breaking the record, but when he heard that his speed could only rank 13th, he could not help but feel a competitive spirit rising up in him. He could use this place to compare himself with his predecessors. The Scarlet Heaven Academy had been established for millions of years. How many elite geniuses had once appeared here? Many of them were currently the pillars of support for the Empire. "You may proceed to the second stage," the tool spirit said. The wall ahead suddenly vanished, revealing a corridor. Ling Han walked over and saw that at the end of the corridor there was another stone chamber. Similarly, it only had a stone table with a jade plaque laid on it. Did he have to take the test again? "You have a maximum of 3 chances to use your spiritual energy to shatter this jade plaque." The tool spirit's voice rang out again. This time, it was a test of spiritual strength and tenacity. If the spirit was not strong enough, it would be equivalent to the punches one delivered lacking weight, and without enough tenacity, it was as if one's fists were made out of tofu. No matter how much strength there was, one would still be shattered by his own blows. From the shattering void tier, cultivators would begin to cultivate their spirits. This was in preparation for advancing into the mortal level. Li Weiwei and the others had been nurturing their spirits with various treasures since childhood, so their spirits were naturally incredibly strong and resilient. This was also the reason why Li Weiwei was not optimistic about Ling Han. They had much too vast a gap between their starting lines. Perhaps Ling Han could pass through the first 3 levels, but it would be as difficult as touching the skies for him to be able to attain a good result. What degree of power the wealth of the various great forces reached was something primarily exhibited in this area. For example, the reason why Li Weiwei failed on the 5th level was not because her spirit was not strong enough, nor was her talent inadequate, but rather the fact that she had much too little combat experience. Ling Han smiled slightly. How could his spirit lose to these members of the younger generation of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire? Chapter 895, Maximum Strength of the Shattering Void Tier. Chapter 895, Maximum Strength of the Shattering Void Tier. Ling Han looked at the jade plaque, and with a thought, a stream of spiritual energy surged out, heading towards the jade plaque. This was strength of the spirit. When the spirit was strong to a certain extent, a mere thought would be able to move the regulations of the heavens and earth, and shatter even a colossal planet. Of course, this was something that could only be done by an ultimate elite of the Genesis tier, and Ling Han was still who knew how far away from that step. Pa! The jade plaque immediately shattered into pieces. Ling Han smiled slightly. He was still very far away from being able to destroy a planet with a single thought, but how difficult would it be to shatter a jade plaque? Furthermore, he merely delivered a careless strike and had not used Sword Heart. Otherwise, his spiritual energy would be even more frightening. This was because he had drunk the reincarnation tea. Even if it was just a single sip, his present spiritual strength would definitely not be weaker than any other shattering void tier cultivators in this world. I have not yet said what range of distance you have to be in to make your move, the tool spirit suddenly said. Ling Han gave an ah and said, "Is it too near? Then just place another jade plaque." No, you have passed, the tool spirit said. According to the rolls, you can be as close as 3 feet away to blast out your spiritual energy. Ling Han could not help but shed cold sweat. Why did he feel that this tool spirit carried a bit of the feeling that Small Tower gave off as well? It actually had a cold sense of humor as well. Pei, how could it compare to me? Small Tower, meanwhile, was acting Tsundere again. It disliked other tower-shaped spirit tools the most. You can advance to the 3rd stage, the tool spirit said. The wall once again disappeared, and yet another corridor appeared. Ling Han walked along the corridor to the end, and saw that there was yet another stone chamber ahead of him. However, in comparison to the previous 2 chambers, this one was 100 times bigger. Rather than calling it a stone chamber, it would be more appropriate to call it an arena. Block 10 moves from him, and you can pass, the tool spirit said. Starlight flickered and condensed into a human figure. This was a human figure made out of spots of light, and one could vaguely distinguish that it was the image of a man. He had a tall, slender figure, but his exact features could not be clearly seen. Young man, make your move, the starlit man said, his voice clear and loud, possessing a kind of forcefulness that could cause others to yield. Ling Han could not help but be surprised and said, "Why is this so similar to a real person?" Not just the appearance, but also those reflexes and that presence. In the first place, it was formed from the spiritual mark that an elite left behind, the tool spirit said. Throughout history, out of all participants, only the person with the strongest battle prowess would be able to leave his spiritual mark behind, becoming an assessment for those who come afterward. Ling Han was even more curious now and asked, "Then this is—" "Su Ran of a certain clan," the starlit human figure said. "Su Ran, he entered into the academy 300,000 years ago and has been known as the greatest genius in history. He left 300 years later, charging out into the world alone, and no further news was heard of him," the tool spirit said. "In this million years, no other person surpassed him." Ling Han was shocked. He was a monster. The tool spirit made its evaluation. In the same cultivation level, others could only approach his height, yet were unable to stand as his equal. What more surpass him? The test you are undergoing is only on the level of the Shattering Void tier, and he is also the keeper of the record on the Mountain River tier. This treasured spirit tool could actually start up another assessment on the level of the Mountain River tier. Ling Han's eyes could not help but blaze with fierce fighting spirit. Pointing at Su Ran's starlight body, he asked, "What if I can defeat him?" "Then you would have automatically passed the 3rd stage on the remaining 8 levels, the tool's spirit replied. The test on every 3rd stage of each level is to withstand 10 moves from him, but the higher the level, the stronger he would be, and the finer his moves would be. Ling Han was filled with competitive spirit. He finally had a strong interest, and he said, "Senior Su, please make your move." "Take care." Su Ran hollered and took the initiative to move, delivering a punch straight at Ling Han's chest. There was obviously no art to this move. It was simple and ordinary, but when the fist shot over, it felt as if the whole world was about to collapse, and Ling Han was at the center of the cave-in. Simplifying the complex, this was a mastery of fist heart. Ling Han nodded. The great Tao was most simple, and in fist arts, Su Ran's grasp of the skill had exceeded the move itself. A careless punch would be in accordance with the great Tao and truth, possessing ultimate might. However, cultivators were still strongest in their strength. Ling Han flipped over his palm and delivered a palm strike. As the earth overturning seal was used, a golden light flickered brilliantly. Pum! In the exchange of a single blow, Su Ran was forced back 30 steps, while Ling Han did not move at all. Ling Han could not help but frown and asked, "Your ability is obviously not limited, so why will you not exert your full effort?" "Because this is only the first level," the tool spirit answered. "In the assessment of the 9-storied tower, One level was stronger than the previous. Ling Han broke out into laughter and said, "Unseal his power! I want to battle the strongest shattering void tier, cultivator." The tool spirit considered it for a moment, then said, "As you wish." Hong, a frightening energy, suddenly exploded from Su Ran's starlit body, becoming solid and transforming into waves that surged out. The waves washed over Ling Han's body, and he could not help but come out in goosebumps. This strength was too powerful. Yet Ling Han was fearless and merely felt incredibly excited. He said, "This is the strength of 20 stars of shattering void tier. Ha ha ha, no wonder no one has been able to surpass you. You have really cultivated the strength of shattering void tier all the way to the maximum limit." In shattering void tier, the limit of 20 stars of shattering void tier was not for battle prowess, but rather strength. However, not many could reach battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier. What more pure strength? "Come." Ling Han laughed loudly and approached fearlessly. Pung! With a single blow, Ling Han was sent flying. However, his physique was too monstrous. This punch did not even cause the slightest bit of injury to him. One could claim that if the test of the third stage was to withstand 10 moves, then not just 10 moves, he would be fine even with a 100,000 moves. Without reaching the strength of the immortal level, how could Su Ran possibly damage godly metal? With a loud shout, Ling Han came back around. He directly drew a bow and notched an arrow. The annihilating dragon star arrow was used, and one towards the other. Su Ran did not possess a physique as strong as his, and dared not to use his bare body to take this strike head-on. Immediately, he gripped his fist and delivered a blow at the arrow. Pa! Undoubtedly, the arrow was sent flying by his blow, but there was also a burst of starlight on Su Ran's hand. It seemed he had been injured. That was the annihilating dragon star arrow, after all, a powerful secret technique really inherited from an elite of the immortal realm. Added with the fact that Ling Han had conquered the whole lower realm, there was naturally no lack of resources in his possession. He reforged a level 10 treasured bow, and forged arrows from a certain amount of level 10 precious metal. What kind of strength did Ling Han presently possess? 16 stars of shattering void tier. If one took on this shot from him head-on, what shattering void tier cultivator would be unscathed? Unless his physique could also reach the level of Ling Han's physique. The tool spirit could not help but be stunned. Ling Han's physique and battle prowess both caused its eyes to light up. One had to know that this human had yet to reach the maximum strength of 20 stars of shattering void tier. Ling Han did not pull his punches at all. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Another 3 arrows consecutively shot out. Then, wielding his sword, he charged out. His right hand used the 10,000 techniques returned to 1, whereas his left hand circulated the earth overturning seal, blasting out at Su Ran. Pung, pung, pung. The two were embroiled in a fierce battle. Endless waves of power spread out like waves in a sea. Ling Han used his battle prowess to the fullest. The other's strength was superior to his, so he was naturally not going to go head-to-head with him by force. Instead, he displayed his own battle prowess to its fullest, especially the annihilating dragon star arrow. He combined with it the 2 mystical powers of Thunderclap, Ninth Heaven, and the Eye of Truth, and the battle prowess it could exhibit was the most terrifying. But, disappointingly, Su Ran did not have any weakness at all over his entire body. He was not a real living being, but rather branded by the tool spirit making use of the essence Su Ran had left behind, so it naturally did not possess the weaknesses of an actual living being. However, while it did not have weaknesses, it could still be claimed that its whole body was covered with weaknesses. Ling Han shot out arrows madly, every shot frightening. Once he had closed the distance between himself and Su Ran, he abandoned the bow and used the sword. As the 10,000 techniques returned to 1 slashed out, exploding with an ultimate strike, it would be able to force even an elite the likes of Su Ran to retreat. The battle was at a stalemate. Chapter 896, 6th Level Genius. Chapter 896, 6th Level Genius. If it were any other person, even if their strength was 16 stars of shattering void tear, they also wouldn't be able to fight Su Ran head-on. However, Ling Han was different. His strongest edge wasn't battle prowess, but the ultimate defense brought about by the indestructible Heaven Scroll. This was the most terrifying part by nature. He was already invincible. 10 moves, 20 moves, 50 moves, 100 moves. They had long exceeded the upper limit of moves with the strongest battle prowess of the 9th level of White Star Tower. But the victor was still yet to be determined. Admittedly, Ling Han was being thoroughly thrashed by Su Ran, but under the effects of annihilating Dragon Star Arrow, Su Ran wasn't doing any better. His body continuously emitted flashes of starlight, seemingly about to collapse. If the battle could go on endlessly, then the losing party ought to be Su Ran. The reason was very simple. Ling Han's body was the level of godly metal. There was no solution to this. Stop! The tool spirit finally called a halt to the battle. Pa! The starlight of Su Ran's body immediately transformed into countless spots of light and dissipated. It paused and said, "This battle shall be considered a draw. You are indeed very strong. If your strength further increases by 1 star, then perhaps you can replace me and become the new guard here." Ling Han gave a faint smile. He was only interested in going all out to battle a strong opponent, wasn't inclined to care about being a replacement, especially when there wasn't anything good to be gained from it. He would hardly bother himself with such trouble. You may enter the 2nd level. A flight of stairs appeared in front of Ling Han. He strode forward and ascended the stairs to the 2nd level. The following tests would be the same as that on the 1st level. It would still be based on one's practice of martial arts techniques and using the strength of the spirit to strike the jade plaque, only that the difficulty of martial arts techniques would increase, and the jade plaque would also be strengthened, making it more and more challenging. At the 3rd stage, Ling Han didn't need to be tested again. He automatically passed it. He had spent too much time on the 1st level. 3 speedy people had already rushed to the 3rd level. However, starting from the 2nd level, Ling Han's speed became faster as he made haste to catch up. Look, the 5th level of the tower has lit up. Who is it? So impressive. It must be Fairy Ji. She is someone who is on par with Luo Ba and Lin Yu. Since those two could pass through the 5th level, then Fairy Ji is certainly no exception. Could it be a dark horse like Ma Xing? Haha, you think too much. There can't be that many exceptions. Outside, everyone was in the midst of a heated discussion, while the higher-ups of the Northern Institution were also paying close attention to the assessment. After all, the competition amongst the 4 institutions was extremely fierce. Which one of them wouldn't want to emerge superior to the other 3 institutions? Hey, the 5th level of the tower has lit up again. Are you seeing things? Impossible. I am quite sure that the level has already gotten dark and then lit up again. That's correct. By right, it shouldn't be lighting up for so long. There must be a 2nd person who had passed the 5th level. Good gracious! There are so many geniuses in this round of the assessment. In the past, it would have been quite amazing to have 2 to 3 1-star geniuses. Now there's actually 5 of them. Gosh, I might have been able to charge to the top 10 in the past, but now I guess there's no hope for me. You really think too much. Even if in the past, there also wouldn't be the slightest possibility for you to achieve it. After a while, the 6th level of the tower was illuminated. What? Everyone was astounded this time. The 6th level of the tower had lit up again. This was the 2nd time previously. Only Ma Xing had passed through the 6th level. Could it be Fairy Ji? She is much more of a genius compared to Luo Ba and Lin Yu, really unexpected. The higher the level, the longer the tower's level would be lit. For example, the first level and the second level had only lit up for about half of a heartbeat's time, but the illumination of the tower's sixth level was flashing for at least 10 heartbeats before it dimmed. The upper echelons of the Northern Institution were indescribably pleased. How many years would it take before they could meet any future two-star genius? It was at this moment that the tower's sixth level was illuminated again. Oh my goodness! The third two-star genius. Who could it be? One of them must be Fairy G, but what about the other one? Everyone was holding their heads in their hands. Being able to pass through to the fifth level was acceptable, but now it was really too exaggerated. One couldn't look at it as merely passing through one more level. Between a one-star genius and a two-star genius was a world of difference. Luo Ba clenched his teeth, had always set his sights on Ji Yin'er. Moreover, the status of Ji clan was slightly inferior to that of the Luo clan. He had intended to ask his clan to propose marriage to the Ji clan after he had entered Scarlet Heaven Academy. But now, if Ji Yin'er really became a two-star genius, then would the Ji clan still approve of this marriage proposal? Probably not, as they would definitely look for a more outstanding candidate to become the husband of Ji Yin'er. One couldn't just look at him as currently being one of the 3 elites of the younger generation in the imperial capital. After 5 years, things would change. After the 3 of them entered the Scarlet Heaven Academy, naturally there would be 3 great elites of the younger generation, or 4 great elites, or 5 great elites, and the like. No, he had to find a way. Since Ji Yin'er was so outstanding, then all the more he couldn't give in to others. T. Heavens. The 5th level of the tower has lit up again. Everyone was shocked dumb. Sure enough, the 5th level of the White Star Tower had lit up again. The 6th one. But the previous batch of people had passed through at about the same time. This person is only now passing through the 5th level. It should be that the person's potential has all but been exhausted, so it is impossible to go to the 6th level, some people speculated. This gained the agreement from the majority of the people, who nodded their heads. A person who had the strength to pass through the 6th level would have been able to pass through the previous 5 levels easily. It wouldn't be like the case now, when others had passed through the 6th level while that person was only passing through the 5th level. Right. Obviously, that person's strength wasn't good enough. That person was Ling Han, of course. He was leisurely passing through the 6th level. No one was going to drive him out anyway, and it was not that he was in a hurry. However, as he didn't have to fight on the 3rd level, his speed was actually getting a lot faster. At this time, most people had left the White Star Tower, while the strongest had already rushed to the 6th level. Those people at the lower levels wouldn't be able to drag their assessment out any longer. There are still 3 people in the tower. The higher-ups of the academy had confirmed with the tool's spirit and subsequently announced it. One of the 3 was definitely Ji Yin'er. This was obvious, as she had yet to come out after she had entered. Who wouldn't recognize this brilliant pearl whose name was famous throughout the imperial capital? However, no one else knew who the other 2 were. Could it be that the blockhead had passed through the 5th level and even the 6th level? Li Weiwei's face was filled with astonishment. Then she stomped her foot angrily. Doesn't that mean I have lost to him again? Arg. Damn. This is horrible. Just then, the 6th level of the tower lit up again. Pooh! Those who had confidently said before that it was impossible for Ling Han to pass through the 6th level now coughed awkwardly, their faces filled with embarrassment. Phut! This face-slapping was extremely painful indeed. Since you can pass through the 6th level, why don't you get a move on? How could there be someone like you who would torment other people? Someone has come out. A man was seen coming out of the entrance to the 9-storied tower. He was a young man clothed in embroidered robes, but almost no one could recognize him. However, everyone knew that anyone that came out would be a genius who had passed through 6 levels of the tower. I know him. His name is Chung Haofei. He's a descendant of the Chung clan. Chung clan? The same Chung clan as that of the Minister of War, Lord Chung? Hee, other than the Minister of War, Lord Chung, what other clan would dare to be addressed as the Chung clan? That old man in the corner shook his head in disappointment. Although that junior of his was expected to become a 2-star genius, and indeed shocked the world with an amazing feat, he still fell short of his expectations. Damn, why would there be 3 6th-level geniuses, one?